Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is going to be my last MML video that I'm doing. I I had this thought midway through the season, this season, where I was like, oh, if I won, it'd be cool to make like a how I won video, kind of copying like what Wolfie VGC does when he does his stuff, like when he wins a tournament. And so this video is how I won season 4 of MML. It's also like a career retrospective and just blurt out all the ideas I have about draft because I'm done playing draft now, as you guys all know. So I just wanted to I have this like rough script over here that I'm going to go over and just make sure I keep my ideas flowing in one direction and whatever. And I don't know if anybody's going to watch this or they're just going to watch the part where I talk about the game that I played them or whatever, but maybe this will help some of you guys in the future. And if not, it's just a way for me to get out all my ideas and then talk about the really fun season that I had. So that's why I thought I would do this. um, yeah, so this is really just a way to reflect and summarize the season. Um, but the first thing I want to say about the season is my main skill in draft league is that I try really hard. I think effort takes you further than anything else. I think that's probably true in life most of the time, and then it's true certainly in draft league. I've seen a lot of people um, basically outperform what I would think is their skill ceiling just because they're trying really hard. So if there's one thing you can take out of this video, it's that it pays off to try really hard, especially in draft. It certainly did for me. Um, I I think after you watch this video, you'll probably think I'm insane because this is just a brain dump of all the things, and you'll see what I do to prep for games and stuff like that, and you'll just be like, okay, that guy's crazy. Um, but it just comes from me wanting to try really hard and enjoying that part of it. So um, I tried really hard for this season, harder than most seasons I played. Maybe the hardest I ever tried. I'm not sure, but after season 3 in MML, I was a little bit disappointed. I lost in semifinals after getting the 2 seed, and it was the second time I lost in semis, 2 seasons in a row. So it was pretty disappointing. And I immediately jumped in and just played like a lot of ladder. Um, in the off season for draft league, I normally the best the best you can do. It's not going to be identical to what you're going to see in draft league, but playing the different like OU, UU, RU, just playing a bunch of that and just testing mons and just seeing what the meta is and what looks good and trying to apply that in your head to how it would look in draft is what I try to do. So after the new DLC dropped, we had our final influx of Pokemon um, to the Gen 9 uh, decks, and it was like, okay, everybody's here now. We can kind of just like figure out what works and what doesn't, what looks good and what isn't. So I did a ton of that. And then on top of that, I was constantly messing with and adjusting my draft prep doc. Um, I think I've shared this with maybe Sin. I don't know if anyone else is. I know Cole's seen this, but every season before I go into it, once the um, tier list is settled or normally once it gets handed out when I'm doing the tier list myself, I kind of had a heads up on it, and I just start to break it down and look at it into different ways um, I can approach it. And so my prep doc is here. This is like a PDF of it. I did it in Google Sheets, but yeah. So, before I get started talking about the draft and the way I approached it, first and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who had a pick before me in the draft and didn't pick Dragapult and left it for me to pick. Thank you very much. This is everybody except Sin and Mitch. So thank you to Palafins, Kyce, Taco, Zjayne, Cole, Ronan, Dewey, Spooks, and Rein. Because all of you passed up on Dragapult, and Dragapult definitely carried me this season. So yeah, here's my draft doc. This is the most chaotic of all my like docs and prep stuff. It looks crazy, but I'll break it down. Um, the document's somewhat incomplete because like I frequently would do mock drafts just like on a piece of paper or something. Uh, I did it while I was at work, just at home doing whatever. Sometimes it's just easier to write it down than type it. or just a thought I had when I'm not near my computer or something. So not all the prep I did for the draft is on here, but a lot of it is, and it'll be good to look at. So as you can see at the top, this is the first thing I normally do is like break down each tier into the things that I like. I stopped at 14 because this season I kind of looked at it from a more like take a step back, like a more macro perspective as opposed to micro. So it was less about like what's in each tier and just like these roles I wanted to fill. But I started to do that, and you can see I was really interested in Darkrai and Dragonite. Then, of course, Dragapult in 19, and Amorous and Keldeo in 18, all these guys, and so on and so forth. Then I kind of I moved on to this boxes I like to check thing. You can see that here. Yeah, here's early interest stuff. Is just like guys as Claude, Ensign, those came to fruition. Vikavolt, Zarina, of course, Swampert, Mimikyu I got at some point, Dragapult. So all these guys, and then what I liked about them, I was just jotting down ideas. Then I moved on to these boxes I like to check thing, which is what I started to talk about. I've had this for like a long time, since before this generation. I made this like list of things I like to get on a draft league team or things I've had success with in the past, and it was 15 things, which this is Intimidate, a water type and a ground type, duh. Rapid spin or defog, so removal, hazard setting, weather, knockoff users, terrain setting if possible. That's like the least important of these. Haze, clear smog, and just in general phasing. Momentum moves, U-turn, volt switch, flip turn, baton pass, teleport, all that. Trick room is nice to have if you can find it. Water absorbs like my favorite ability, hands down, except maybe intimidate. And then, which of course was the first thing up here. Sturdy, I really like to have. I've gotten a lot of use out of that, especially with Dawn Fan on past teams. Priority is nice. Counter and Mirror Coat's always cool. I did not use that this season, but that's like a cheap way to pick up KO sometimes. And then Levitate's really nice. I wrote specifically to, to combo with Clodsire, which is funny. And then normally I check it off here as like I draft or as I make these mock teams. But here I added more to it, so I just added like what I like about these things, like, or what I like with it. So like Intimidate, it's really nice if the Intimidator has recovery or momentum. Last season I had Landorus and like Intimidate U-turn. Intimidate plus momentum is really rare. Lando and Ensign are the best of them. I think like Hitmontop has Baton Pass, so I was looking at that a little bit. Yeah, you can see Incineroar's bolded. That was the one I most wanted. Lando T I used last season, so I wasn't super interested in having it, but it was on the table. Salamence I was very interested in, and then Luxray I've had in the past and had success with that. Water type, I really like our water type with Scald, which Volcanion has a better version of Scald, and then Milotic has it too, so I was looking at that. Ground type you have to have. I prefer them to be defensive, so Clodsire is my number one. Ursaluna is on the table, of course, as well. And then for removal, I was looking at Serena. Mandibuzz interest me with Defog too. Hazard setting, I really wanted webs. I wanted webs in Season 3. I wanted webs in Season 4. I don't know, it just didn't happen. So Ribombee and Vikavolt were on my radar. So yeah, that's just all this stuff is like breaking that down and where I can find those things. I quickly was like sentimental thinking about stuff, things I wanted to try but never had, I think, is this list. Yeah, Gyarados, I'm still upset that I never used Gyarados. I always thought that'd be a great Pokemon to have. Magnezone, yeah, I'm not super upset about that one. Haxorus, I always wanted to try. Pert, definitely. Reuniclus, I did so much testing with Reuniclus for this season, but just couldn't fit him in the end. Incineroar, of course, Salamence and Clodsire, those were all things. Then I wrote like partners for him, started to do that, didn't really continue that. Then I started thinking about cores. I think cores are always important to have, which just means like people refer to like Fire, Water, Grass core, the Mythic core, which is like Steel, Fairy, Dragon. I'm definitely a Fire, Water, Grass guy, but yeah, that's just me. So here's some cores I thought about. It was like Clodsire, Incineroar, Gyarados made a lot of sense to me. Like Claude and Incin are weak to ground, and then you get Gyarados to cover for that. Gyarados is only weak to rock and electric, which Clodsire covers. Clodsire covers the rock for Incin. It covers the fighting for Incin. The ice on Clodsire is covered by Incin. So I thought these three would be really good. And it already gives you like your flying type, water type, ground type, fire type, dark, and poison. That's pretty amazing. I wrote down their speed tiers because that was interesting to me too. Then I like moved forward with it, and I'm sort of starting to make a team here, and it's like Vikavolt sounds good, another way to help with the ground stuff. Filled in a nice speed tier. Zarina, same idea. Helps with hazards at that point. Then Ninetales A, because I always like, once I start making, I hate fairies. Like, I just don't like the pool of fairies. I never have. So pretty early on, I normally try to like pick out a fairy that could work because I just don't like them. So that's where Ninetales comes from. Plus, I needed some speed. But Uniclus, like I said, I was really on, and then Dragapult, of course. I wrote down a couple other cores here with like Iron Hands Meloetta. I thought was a really nice core because Hands is just weak to like, well, Meloetta's only weak to Bug and Dark, and Hands resist both. So I thought that was cool. They both have momentum in Volt Switch and Baton Pass, I think it is, for Meloetta. Maybe it's U-Turn, I can't remember. Clodsire, Goldango's a nasty combo. They're both weak to ground, though. But I just thought, like, in terms of setting hazards with Clod, he's obviously very good at that, and then Goldango keeping him up. So yeah, then I started thinking about some of the important types, and like, I guess I broke it down even just like more condensed from those 15 things I liked, and I had like ghost types, steel types, water types. I think are maybe the three most important, and then ground pretty close thereafter. Um, Intimidate and Defog, Rapid Spin. I guess I just started looking at these five things. So ghost types, I only really like these ones. Again, the pool of ghosts and maybe Mimikyu too is pretty small for me personally. Steels is really small. I looked at Goldango and Metagross, but Metagross didn't last long on my radar because it got a bunch of new tools this gen with like knockoff and trailblaze and stuff, and it was like we had to make a lot of points, or at least we felt that way, and it was too many points for me. Uh, Water types, I was really interested in Samurott H this season. Definitely was on my radar. Keldeo was I always wanted to use, so that was on there. Tentacruel, which I did pick up but didn't end up using. Volcanion, of course. That Volcanion is my favorite draft Pokemon of all time. I had him for one season, MVP that season of the league, and we won. That was the last season I played in Gen 8. I don't think Volcanion's quite as good now for some reason. This meta just doesn't seem to fit him as well, but in terms of like a Pokemon and what I'd want in a Pokemon, it's like flawless. Gyarados, Cloyster, Golduck, yes. Golduck's just because I like Golduck. I don't think it's good. Intimidate, I already covered some of those. There's Top that I was talking about earlier. Defog, Rapid Spin. Yeah, Braviary H is cool with Defog, and so is Decidueye. I looked at those. Tentacruel's a great spinner, I think. All the Hitmons with Spin is a nice like backup removal. Like, they probably shouldn't be your number one guy, except maybe Hitmontop. And then Zarina, you see her again. Then I started to, I sort of was tapping into like all the stuff in my past that worked well, because normally I don't try to redraft things. I try to avoid that as much as possible. I think in the end I drafted like 90 some odd Pokemon, and I only reused like 13 of them. And Rotom Wash was the only one I used. No, Rotom and Arcanine I used 3 times. So I tried to be diverse, but here I was like, okay, what are the best ones we've used? Because I was trying to go no holds barred this season, like use whatever is good and just try to make the best team possible. Like, remove all biases, which is really hard in Pokemon, but I was trying to do that. So it was like Arcanine, Volcanion, Goldango, Breloom, Luxray, Rotom Wash, Dragonite, Cloyster, and Amorous Eye, Cinderace. These are all things I had really good success. A lot of those were in MML in past seasons, some even before that. And here's where I first made my breakthrough. Sorry, I'm just following my script here. Yeah, Cole and I talk frequently about this tier list being the hardest to crack in MML so far. Like, 1, 2, 3 felt like I kind of understood it, had a good plan going in, but 4 took me a while. Like, I did a lot of prep for this, and I think it was hard to figure out a good combo, but we got there. We were kind of thinking, we're like, I think that makes it the best tier list we made of the 4 seasons that we did. I don't know if that's true, but like, it's always subjective at the end of the day, but I think it was the best, so hopefully that's why it was so hard to crack. Ultimately, like, when a commissioner makes a tier list, it's supposed to be hard for them. Like, they shouldn't really be able to find value in anything. Like, everything should be exactly where they think it should be, hopefully. And so it's hard for you to find, like, okay, this thing's better than its points or is not worth this, so I don't have to think about it. Like, there should be none of that for a commissioner. So if you do it right, at least in my opinion, that's how it should be. So yeah, my first breakthrough came right here. You can see it's like, I wrote 108 to 110 is a crazy common speed tier. Like, I liken this to, it was the first time I noticed like a speed tier pile up. For this dex, I noticed one in Sword and Shield, back in Sword and Shield, early VGC days. Like, so many important mons were 80 speed. I remember that. It was like Venusaur, Togekiss, Mamoswine, Chandelure, Braviary, and they were all like relatively important to the meta, at least in some way. And it was just like it made them all run max speed because you didn't want to give up that speed tier. And it made things like the Rotoms, which are just above at 86, like really good speed tier because they're frequently outspeeding important Pokemon. So I've kind of found that here in this dex, and that like 108 to 110 has like so many Pokemon. I didn't write them down here, but I wrote them down on my script here. I mean, there's so many in there. Like it had 108 to 110 has Iron Moth, all 4 Ogerpons, both Lotties, Gengar, Zoroark H, Espeon, Lycanroc Dusk, Walking Wake, Ninetales A, all 3 Swords of Justice plus Keldeo, Galvantula, and Fernape. Like that's not all of them, but all those are very relevant. And I knew like a lot of those were going to be drafted, so I really wanted to capitalize on that by drafting something from like 111 to 120. So I wrote like here are my favorite 111 to 120s. In the end, I ended up playing 12 of those Pokemon from 108 to 110 in the regular season and 2 in playoffs. So I was totally right, and this is where I first was like on Thundurus. Like Thundurus Eye and Tornadus Eye are kind of like bastard Pokemon. Like their other forms, their Therian forms are way better, at least on paper, and so it's easy to overlook those two. Like they often end up in like I think they're in NU right now, but they're still legendaries. Like they have amazing abilities, good move pools, good stats, and I was like, oh, those could be really good, and especially because they were 111, like keeping you right above that speed pile up from 108 to 110. Yeah, that was really good. So I tried to get Thundurus, or that was my plan at some point. I come to that, you'll see in the like mock drafts, and I was really big on having a 111 to 120, and in the end, I settled on Thundurus, and I was really glad I did because Thundurus was awesome this season. Then I was hoping to get someone above 120 as well. Good Pokemon above 120 speed are like really few and far between, and most of them cost a lot of points, at least on our speed tier. But I was hoping to get one. I had some here like Inteleon I'd used before. It's not amazing. These are their points right here. Ribombee, like I said, I was really interested in webs. I wanted Ribombee, but it didn't end up happening. Then I like kept rolling with the speed tier thing, so I broke it down by each like tens, like 120 plus. Here are the things I like. 111 to 119. I want to highlight Cinccino. I still think Cinccino could be so good. It like doesn't cost a lot of points. It has really good abilities, which makes it pretty strong. It has U-turn. I think it has what's that mousehold move called? Tidy Up. Like I think it has Tidy Up. Like that thing can be really good, and it's 115, so it's in that speed tier I like. If you're looking for someone for cheap that's really good in that speed tier, I think Cinccino's a good pick. For me, it's hard to pick normals because they don't like help with the synergy of the team all that much. This season it was a little bit easier because I had Dragapult, so it was nice to have like a ghost immunity, but normally I'm pretty shy from normals. Next, I have like Pokemon with less than 3 weaknesses. Some of these aren't even true. When I look back, I was like, what am I talking about? Like Iron Hands has what? Ground, Fairy, something else. Ground, Fairy. The hell is his third weakness? Oh, Psychic. Yeah, so not all of these have less than 3. I thought they did, but a lot of them do. This came from like the idea of the last season. I had like a few guys with that. I mean, I had Vaporeon. Like any mono normal only has 2. Landorus is only weak to ice and water, and then Goodra is only weak to like ground and fighting. So I had a lot of Pokemon with less than 3 weaknesses, and it made switching like really easy because there weren't like tech moves that people were clicking. Like it was pretty obvious what they were going to click most of the time. Then I got into Momentum. I wrote down best baton passers, but these ended up being some other things too. Like these guys are all baton passers, I think. Pheasantipity, Meloetta. Yeah, and then I started like a lot of these are U-turners as well. Petrona's Parting Shot, that's another one. I don't even know what I'm getting into here at the bottom. I guess Volt Switch. Yeah, these are like weird Volt Switch guys. Oh, I think I was writing down like guys you wouldn't expect to have certain moves. Like Fergraf gets Baton Pass. Like a lot of people don't know that, I think. Yeah, so I'm always interested in momentum, so that's what that was. Okay, stop changing pages. Okay. Blah blah blah. Okay, Okay, then I kind of finally settled on an archetype after I was looking around for a while. I was like early on, I was really into Sun. Um, like I thought, I guess I've made a ton of VGC teams with Sun. Like that was a common archetype for me, especially in Gen 8. I did one in Gen 7 as well with Groudon, and I was kind of just thinking, and it was like Walking Wake having a water move that is not only usable in Sun but is boosted by Sun is like seems so ridiculously broken on paper. It made me think, I was like, if Sun is ever going to be good, it's got to be right now. And I liked Sun already, so I'm like, it's got to be good. So I started looking at Walking Wake teams, and one thing that interested me was like, I was okay with Ninetales or Torkoal, which made the prospect of drafting Sun possible or more likely. Because that's one thing I try to do when I draft is like make sure this team is at least realistic. I think a lot of people struggle with that when they go into drafting. Like if normally if there's someone like I'm getting sniped all the time, like they keep talking about getting sniped, it's probably just because you have an unrealistic like draft plan. That's not always the case, but often it is. And it's like, okay, why did you expect to get all these things? And so for me, the idea that there were two setters that I would like is cool. It made it more possible, as opposed to Rein, where you really want Pelipper. Like obviously you can run Politoed, but Pelipper is way better. And so that makes it scarier because like if you start drafting Rein stuff and you don't get Pelipper, then you're screwed. Whereas this is like someone might also take Sun, and I still have the other one. Yeah. So I played with Sun teams for a while in OU, a little bit on UU as well. Um, yeah, and then I really started breaking it down into like the aspects of Sun. Unfortunately, because this is a PDF, like it's broken up here because it's on page 1 and page 2. But you can see things like this is the cool part about Sun. Like I've always said, Sun is like the most saucy of the weathers. Like there's so much you can do with it. Like sunny day moves, like to set it. Though every weather has that, but like flash fire to help you defend against it. Levitate to help your ground types. Water absorb to help your fire types outside of Sun. Then you get synthesis and morning sun, which are boosted in the Sun. Like they get 75% healing. So I wrote down the guys that get that and who I like. God, this is so hard not to swap pages. Where's the rest of it down here? Yeah. So here are some other Sun thoughts. Like growth. People who have growth become. It's like a Swords Dance and a Nasty Plot, so that's cool. Venusaur Comfy, our believer, guys who had it. Solar Beam is like now usable as a tech move. Like Lamora has Solar Beam. What? Jan Mega has it. Vikavolt. Like these are all guys that now get an extra tech move basically. Solar Blade is the same thing. Like I was so hyped on Sun Ceruledge with Solar Blade for a while. Like Gallade gets it as well. I wrote down Iron. I don't know why Iron Boulder's in parentheses, but maybe because it was like possibly going to get banned at that point. I don't know. But yeah, I was huge on Ceruledge. Harvest users, which is our believer Trevenant and the Exegutors. I was like, Harvest you can work with in Sun. You get the 100% chance to recover the berry. Chlorophyll users, of course. Solar power users, which in this gen, the only one I like is Charizard. I don't even know if there is another one. I think Houndoom maybe. Or that might have just been its mega form. I can't remember if it actually has solar power normally. Photosynthesis guys, of course, added a huge new aspect to Sun. So yeah, I started like look at all those things you can do with Sun. I was like, wow, this is amazing. If you're not normally when you draft weather teams, you're pretty like constricted with what you can do. But with Sun, it's like there's so much you can do. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I was so on Sun for a while. You can see I have this like bolded box. I think this is what I settled on. I tried a bunch of stuff like Sun Lilligant H, Sun Ninetales. I guess what I settled on here was like I was big on Walking Wake. In the end, I wanted Ninetales over Torkoal, but I would have been okay with Torkoal. But Great Tusk, Photosynthesis, then Ceruledge I talked about with Solar Blade and just Fire Move getting boosted. I was still big on Thunderous Eye because of the Prankster Sunny Day aspect is like a backup way to set it is really cool. I'm always big on Gardevoir. I wish I used it more. Glamora here was just because like I don't like a lot of poisons. I was very interested in using Orthworm this season, but it didn't end up happening. It was big on the Sun archetypes because of the ground immunity was really cool. You can see Arboliva there. I was interested in because of Harvest. So yeah, this was the way. This was the way I would prep. Is like, and you can see I have the colors from last season. I wasn't Mount Silver Salamence yet. But yeah, I'd like copy the team from the doc last season, paste it here, and then just like fill it out with points. make sure I'm under budget. Check their speed tiers is always a big deal, and then I'd put missing types here. So like on this team, I was missing no types. Sometimes I'll put backup Pokemon right next to it. But yeah, so I was so big on Sun, and then I don't know. At some point, I just got deeper into it, and I just didn't. It still felt restrictive. Like it felt like this is my last season. I want to be open to drafting basically everything. And the second I decided on Sun archetype, it took out like so many Pokemon that you can't have. So I think I was like a week before the draft. I scrapped that idea. I was like, okay, I'm not doing Sun. I tried a bunch of other stuff. Like this one's ICPL clone. That's the name of the league we were in before this. That was the league I won with Volcanion. So I was trying to like start with Volcanion, build from there. It didn't work. Didn't like it. Then I was interested in Raging Bolt for a second. I got like kind of far into this mock, and I was like, hey, I don't have Defog, and I wanted Defog, so that was annoying. I stopped. Claude Goldengo I wrote down earlier as a core. I tried that, didn't like it. Iron Hands Meloetta I wrote down, which was cool, which is not really like the main core, so I'm not sure why that's the title of this team. But yeah, I tried that a couple times. I was really interested in that combo. And then I got to a point where I got normally you start with like the first one or two mons you want, like that 1-2 punch, the really strong high point stuff, and then you draft from there. And then it just wasn't working. So you can see a ton of these teams have Darkrai. I was interested in Darkrai for sure. And then I changed it up. Then I was like, all right, I want these core guys. Like here, it's Clodsire, Thundurus. I was interested in Haxorus, Saraled, Zarina, Gardevoir. Like a lot of these guys ended up being the same. And I was like, let's start with that middle core, cover that, and then go from there. Fill out the top and then the bottom. And so I did that here. For a while, I was like, Keldeo Weavile's really nice. It's special, physical. They have 4 different types that they cover. They're really, really fast. That was cool. I was going with that for a little bit. And then there's some other stuff here. Like this is where I made my speed tier chart for the week. Every week beforehand. This is left over from when I did, looks like Ronan's team. And yeah, but then this is eventually what I settled on right before the draft was, well, I also, actually, this isn't necessarily what I settled on. I think I boxed the, like, thing I wanted most, so I was very interested in Dragapult, but it's just a hard thing to plan for because, like I said, about being realistic, like, who thinks they're going to get Dragapult unless you have the first, like, 2 picks? Like, it's so likely to go early, and then I end up getting the 10th pick. I'm like, I'm not getting that thing. But, you can see my ending team was really close to this. Like Pult, Keldeo, Claude, Thundurus, Scizor, Incineroar, Zarina. We had all of this. I had Gardevoir at the beginning, got rid of it. I never got to Dunsparce. Taka wouldn't give that up for good reason. He was doing well with it, but very close to what I actually got. So I'd like to think I'm a pretty good drafter, especially in terms of being realistic. Like I was very big on like let's make sure this is something we can get. But this was like a stretch, so I was like, okay, we'll see if Dragapult's there, then I can make this team. If not, then we'll go from there. But and you can see on these other teams, like I was willing to draft Keldeo first overall. Like I was big on Keldeo. So the fact that I was able to end up getting it second was pretty cool. But yeah, so I covered all my types here. I wrote down like safest order of stuff, like at what point to get things. Yeah, I really thought I might get Salamence at some point. Yeah, that was like that was the more realistic thing. Hence, my team name is Mount Silver Salamence because I really thought. By the way, Mount Silver. Obviously, before this season started, we told you guys like we were always planning on this being our last season, me and Cole. But Mount Silver Salamence comes from the idea that like when you climb Mount Silver, it's like the final boss thing. So for me, it was like this season's my final boss. That was the idea. But yeah, I have some backups for stuff. Like, okay, if I don't get Salamence, I guess I could do Haxorus and like do some other stuff. So that's what all this was. But I have like Thunder's Theory and backup for Thunder's Eye, but I didn't end up having to do that, which is cool. Yeah, here's a version of the Salamence team. And then in the end, because I really like this, I wanted to make sure it like worked well, and so I looked at those boxes I like to check, and it was like, okay, Intimidate, yeah, Salamence has it. He has Roost, but no Momentum. Okay, that's pretty good. Water type Keldeo doesn't have Scald, that's annoying. Ground type Claude and Golem, like, and I check them green, like if they're good enough for me. Yellow is like kind of have it, and then red is like don't have it at all, like don't have a Levitator. Okay, so that's red. So I hit like 14 of the 15 things if you count the yellow, so that was cool. I added some things at the bottom that I like to have, like Taunt, Encore, and Healing. So yeah, this was like the prep. So going into the draft, like I really wanted this. I kind of thought like the Salamence team was more realistic, but yeah, I really wanted this, and this is basically what I got, except for Zarina, because Dewey took that, and I had to wait to get it until he dropped it, which I knew he would. But the other stuff on here, like I said, is just like some speed tier stuff I do mid through the week. Like sometimes I help people during the season. You guys, some of you might know, like I gave you like a breakdown of your matchup, and the speed tier I would make was on here. So that's part of why this is chaotic. It's also just like so many ideas flowing. Obviously, before the draft, everyone's got a million ideas, so that's why this doc is so chaotic. Yeah. So okay, and then before the draft and during the draft, I was working on this super prep doc, which I sent out to you guys. And it was just like a way to break down different things so I could visualize the tier list. So like I went and blacked out everything that wasn't, like a water type, and then I blacked them out as they got drafted throughout throughout the draft, so that I could just keep visualizing like, okay, what's left of the water types, what's left of the ground types, whatever. Um, and then I went weather and terrain setters, intimidators, the speed tier from 111 to 119 plus 120 plus. I just like made them different colors, like the green is 120 plus. I highly recommend doing something like this to a tier list before you draft. Like, you don't have to be as crazy about it as I was, like filling it out as I went. Um, Other forms of hazard control outside of like defog, rapid spin, there's Cinderace with core change and Espeon if magic bounce, stuff like that. EV Light users, I normally like one on my team. I wasn't able to get one this season, but I was looking at those. Levitate's a great ability. I was looking at those. Water immunes, be it Storm Drain or Water Absorb. Flash Fire guys, Volt Absorbers. I love immunity abilities, as you can see. So yeah, this was my super prep doc. A lot of you looked at this because I sent it out to the league, and updated it as we went through the draft. So some of you have seen this, some of you haven't. Again, I highly recommend doing this. It's just so hard to visualize the whole draft and the whole draft board and like where it's at, especially as the draft goes on. And so it's really good to have like these type ones, because you might start to see like, okay, there's like no ghosts I like left, so I better pick up Skeledirge or whatever. So it helps create urgency, I guess. Let's see what else. Yeah, and this is where I discovered that like I had to pick up Scissor pretty early. So I drafted Scissor 4th because like I don't know why I don't like the steals in this gen. Like these three are amazing. Grudra H I love. Like I don't really like Cobalion. I don't really like these two. Empoleon's meh. I do like Empoleon actually, but yeah. I don't know. There's more than this because some of these are blacked out after they were drafted, but I just didn't like the steals. So at some point I was like, okay, I gotta get Scissor before, otherwise I'm gonna have to like make a huge pivot and not be able to get or just end up with a steal that I don't like. So yeah, then we ended up. Let's see where I want to be now. Okay, I'm done with that draft pep doc. So I ended up after we got into the draft and we drafted our guys, and I start making my team sheet. So this video is also a part like team report. I know they do that in VGC a lot. Like after you win tournaments, you do well with a team, people like break down their team. That's what this video is as well. So here's what we ended up drafting. My team sheet is this thing I update throughout the week. A lot of people have one, and it's just like where I jot down my ideas and where I make my sets and put my speed tiers and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to go through. This is going to be the bulk of this video, I think. And so yeah, this was the way the draft went. We got Dragapult first, which was amazing. I got that in the 10 spot somehow. And then Keldeo next, which was cool because I was willing to get that first. Then we took Claude because after those two, I was like, I need some defense. Then, like I said, I was like, okay, I need a steel type, so I got Scissor, which was cool because that also gave me like Scissor covers so many of the things I like. So it's really nice to get Scissor, like priority, setup, momentum, having one weakness, removal and defog, screens removal and defog, brick break. Scissor's amazing. So that really the team started to come together there, and then. Oh, the other reason why I drafted these two next was because my first two picks were weak to Fairy, so it was like, all right, we need to alleviate that. So Clodsire and Scissor there. And then I think that's where Zarina was picked up, or maybe it was picked up after pick 5. I don't remember exactly, but Serena got picked up, and I was really gutted. I was like, crap, I really wanted that thing. It was after Incineroar, yeah. So I got Incin, which I was surprised that it was still there at 5th. Obviously it just depends on what everyone's looking for, but for me, that was a huge pick. That was like a seminal moment in the draft because I go as my fire types go. Like if I were a gym leader, I'd be a fire type gym leader all the way. Like I said, I've drafted Arcanine 3 times. Incineroar now is amazing. Volcanion's my favorite draft Pokemon of all time. I did really well with Cinderace last season. Uh, season 1 in here, I had Tauros Fire. I put that thing to good work. Like I just love fire types. I don't know. I don't know if it's just the pool of Pokemon or the typing specifically, but I do well with fire types. So getting Incineroar, which I already knew I liked because Cole had used like in his first ever season before MML, and I helped prep with him, so I made a lot of sets for him that season with that. So I was like, oh man, this thing's amazing, and I used it in VGC a bunch, so I was well aware of it. Then Serena got taken, and that really sucked. So I had to pivot and get a Rapid Spinner. So I got Tentacruel, who I think is good, but it's just like I do not need Tentacruel. Like I already have a Water type and a Poison. This is stupid. And then at that point, it was like, now I got 3 guys weak to Psychic, 3 guys weak to Ground. Like, what am I doing? So that was really annoying. Got Gardevoir, as you saw in my draft prep doc. That was like, I was very interested in Gardevoir. I've always been interested in Gardevoir. I never got to use it. And I don't like fairies, so I think I said earlier, like I wanted to pick that thing up pretty early. Which I picked up like Tentacle and Gardevoir before Thundurus because even though I knew Thundurus would be a core part of the team, like probably a starter, it was like I don't think anyone's interested in Thundurus Eye. So I kind of gambled on Thundurus a little bit, waited till pick 8 to pick up a 15-point Mon. So yeah, that's where Thundurus came from, and I was happy to get it there. I was really happy to get Thundurus. That checked off my, now I had the really fast guy above 120, I had the guy above 110, and then another fast guy in Keldeo. I felt like my speed tiers at the top were good, like they're set. Arboliva 7 points. I looked at Arboliva a lot and used it on some teams, so I was now like, okay, cool, that's nice to have. Then it's another like terrain aspect, so that's cool. And part of that came as a panic because I started being weak to ground and stuff. And Thundurus being my only immunity is kind of like the Thundurus Eye is not very neither Thundurus is very defensive, so I wasn't super comfortable with that. So I wanted a little more help with Earthquake. So Grass type plus a way to set grassy terrain. That's where I believe it came from. Zangoose, I really was interested in Zangoose. Obviously, I won a championship with Zangoose in season 1 in here. I felt another one of those speed tier places was 90. I always feel like 90 is good because there's so many from like 80 to 88, particularly like 5 Rotoms. For a while, Baxcalibur was in there at 87. Ceruledge at 85, Mamoswine at 80. All the guys I talked about earlier at 80. Like I just feel like 90 is really good. So Zangoose was my 90 speed tier guy, and then Glalie just a throwaway pick to save points. Didn't really matter. Like it gets Ice Shard, that's cool. I don't know, it gets Spikes. I think I had no interest in using Glalie. I've always felt like I don't need 11 guys. A lot of people like 11 Mon teams. I think 10 is fine, and even at 10, you can have a throwaway guy too. I'm more interested in like 9 Pokemon teams for that I'm realistically going to use. So that was the team. I didn't love it. I was really hoping Dewey would drop Zarina at some point, which I felt very strongly that he would, because Dewey always made a million changes to the team. So I messaged him. I was like, hey, when you drop, I didn't even say if. I'm like, when you drop Zarina, like, give me a heads up so I can pick it up. I think he dropped it after week 2, so we got it pretty quickly and sort of fixed the makeup of this team. So let me quickly explain the nicknames I had for these guys throughout the season. So Dragapult was Bullseye. It's just like, he's playing darts, so hopefully he throws a bullseye. I don't know. Came up with that nickname on... I maybe came up with it on my own. I don't know. It's kind of mid. Keldeo. The Keldeo I used... first thing, this season was 100% legitimate Mons made by me. I did not gen a single Mon. I didn't gen one in for the purpose of... breeding or anything. Like I was 100% legit on this season, which I'm really proud of. Like obviously I don't care if you gen your Mons, like I'm not a purist in that way, but I really like doing it and I get a lot of joy out of it. So I'm really happy that I was able to do that. In the end, I played 9 draft league seasons and 7 of my teams were legit. The only ones that weren't were season 1 in here, because it was like early in the gen. I didn't have enough resources. I didn't want to spend that much time. And then I played 1 season in BDSP, and it was that. If you played BSP, like getting the resources to like EV train every week and stuff is not realistic, because it's similar to an old game where it wasn't realistic back then. So I gen that season as well. But yeah, so the Keldeo I used is from, it's like one of the first event Pokemon I ever got. I got it back in Oris. It says on it that the encounter date is October 3rd, 2016, which checks out because like me and my buddies from high school got back into Pokemon like shortly after the Pokemon Go craze, which was summer of 16. So yeah, that makes sense. That's when I got it. And it was one of, if not the first event Pokemon that I like soft reset to get the right nature for. Because I mean, depending on when you started playing, you may not know, but like natures used to not be changeable until Gen 8. You know, it's relatively new, so you wanted to make sure you had the right nature. So I wanted that one to be modest, so I reset until it was modest. And it was always like I really liked Keldeo as a Pokemon, even the look of it, and it was cool to be able to use it and use an actual Pokemon that I have had for 8 years. So that was nice. Clodsire nickname. Oh, so I couldn't nickname Keldeo because it's an event Pokemon, so it's just Keldeo. Clodsire was Blooper because I saw someone call Paldean Wooper Pooper because it's brown, and I thought that was freaking hilarious. So Claude is Blooper because he's like a little bit blue when he's shiny, and he's also like Clodzire's need a derpy name, and I felt like Blooper's derpy enough, so that's where that came from. Scizor is nicknamed Splicer because it was like my Scyther shiny in my collection, and then for this season I was like, oh, I need a Scizor shiny, so I just evolved it, and I don't know, Splicer sounded cool for Scyther. I just kept it for Scizor. Incineroar is Incinerate, as some of you saw. It's like a Latin term. I stole that from Wolfie VGC. It's like he did this team building process like set of videos back in Gen 7, like before he wasn't quite so big on YouTube then, and it was like about him prepping and making a team for a tournament, and it was this like Kyogre team, and it did have Incineroar on it, and I remember he was like talking about how he wasn't doing well that season, and he made a new alt on Showdown, and his name, he typed in like Latin translator, like rising from the ashes or something like that, and it was Incinera or Incinerate like this one is, and he was like, oh my god, it's almost the word Incineroar. He's like, this is amazing. So I can't remember if he nicknamed his Incineroar that, but I always hung on to that. And that series was like the first time I saw like how to use the calc and how to make sets for yourself, like, and really get in depth with it. And it was a series that like nobody watched, but to me it was fascinating, and it was like unedited, just raw footage of him like prepping, and it really stuck with me. And it was one of the reasons I really got into like competitive Pokemon, or like got really in depth with it. And so that nickname's really special to me, and so is this Incineroar. Tentacruel ended up being Serena, and Serena's nickname is Make Me Act Up for obvious reasons. Thundurus, it can't be nicknamed similar to Keldeo. This is an event Pokemon. It says, I know I got it in Ultra Sun Ultra Moon. I redeemed it on July 25th, 2018. So this Pokemon's almost 6 years old as well. Well, Keldeo was 8. This one's 6. So these are some old Pokemon. I won my last Draft League season of Gen 8 back in ICPL with this Pokemon. Except it was Thundurus Therian, so I just changed the form and made it Thundurus Eye. So now this specific Thundurus that I have in my boxes is like, I've won 2 draft leagues with it, which is really cool. And that's one of the really rewarding parts of using your own Pokemon, is like after the fact you get to look at them and be like really proud of them. Yeah, so I'll always love that Pokemon. The Porygon Z I ended up having was Epilepsy, because that's like kind of what it's supposed to be representing, or what it reminds me of, and also because of I think in the first season of the anime there was like a Porygon episode that was causing people to have like epileptic reactions, and it wasn't aired in the US, so I don't know. I stole the nickname from somebody. I did not come up with that. Tinkaton, I caught that this season once I drafted it. I didn't have it before the season. I nicknamed it Tinkle Pinkle. I don't know. I came up with it on my own. I thought it sounded funny. And then Glalie and Graveler, I don't care what their nicknames are because I didn't use them. But yeah, so that's the team. Now I'm going to actually get into the team sheet. So I started my team sheet, and this is like my favorite part. One of my favorite parts of the draft league season is like after you draft your team, you get to just start deep diving it and look at what you have, and hopefully there's not a ton of surprises because everything you drafted should be deliberate. But like sometimes you get into their move pool, like you're on Showdown under usually useless moves, and you start to see stuff. You're like, oh my god, that I could use that, or I could see a use for that, and it gets really exciting. And so I break down my speed tiers, which was just a way to visualize it. Like obviously I'd been looking at it through the draft to make sure it was okay. These speed tiers were pretty good. It changes as as I get my guys, but then I average the stats of everybody just to like look at, maybe that'll reveal a flaw or not. Just check the average BST. 518 is like close to a starter. Starters have 525 unless your name is Swampert for some reason, has like one more BST than everybody else. BST meaning base stat total. And these averages don't really mean anything because like Clodsire has a super low Spatak stat, which brings down the team's average, but doesn't matter because you're never going to use it. In fact, it's a good thing. Like, it saves him stat points in other places. So, like, this doesn't really mean that much. I just use it to compare to, like, old teams, basically, and see, like, if it's higher or lower, or, like, if it's, like, mostly if it's really low to see if, like, I have an issue. But, yeah, this was pretty normal result. Then I transferred that boxes to check thing here to see what I had. Obviously, I had almost everything you can see. Yeah, I ended up getting rid of Tentacruel and added Zarina. So I always like Rapid Spin and Defog just so you have options for different games. Once I got Zarina, I did have that. Well, I had it with Tentacruel, but I didn't like Tentacruel for this team. Different ways to set hazards. For the longest time, it was just Claude because Glalie had spikes, Graveler had Stealth Rock, but I was never bringing those. So Tentacruel had spikes, but I was never using that either. So the hazard setting was all on Claude, and that was annoying. And that's where the Tinkaton came from later. Was like, I want another way to set rocks, and it ended up being a big deal because I used it twice, and it helped a lot. In both those games, I didn't want to bring Claude, so a couple times early on, like I forced Claude because I really wanted rocks, especially in like week 4 when I played Sin. I was like, I need rocks desperately, but I don't even want to bring Claude. I'll talk about that later. Then I got weather in some way. Like I just wrote down who had ways to set weather, who had knockoff on the team, blah, blah, blah. So that's what all this is. I start breaking it down, get excited about stuff like, oh, cool, I have a bunch of taunt users, you know. I did have Sturdy in the form of Graveler, which I was never going to use, but yeah. Look, my first team and the ending team too had so many ways to momentum. I'm sure you guys know that. That's obviously a big aspect of my game, but like, look at this. Like, Dragapult, Thundurus, Scissor, Incineroar all had U-turn. Tentacruel at the time and Keldeo had flip turn. Thundurus I had Volt Switch. Dragapult, Keldeo, Scissor, Incineroar, Zangoose had Baton Pass. None of these guys were going to use it, but it was there. Incineroar had Parting Shot. Gardevoir had Teleport. Like, I had like every form of momentum possible on the team. Like, it was so cool. I love that aspect of it. And I had Trick Room with Gardevoir, which I ended up dropping Gardevoir, so that sucked. But I did like having a way to set Trick Room. I didn't end up using it though. And then I start jotting down like ideas for guys. Like, these are more like far-fetched stuff. Like, not, some of it is obvious. Some of it is like, oh, this could happen at some point. But these are just like, this is where you get into the usually useless moves and you start to come up with ideas like Incineroar bulk up sets with Drain Punch or CC, like, and then Flame Charge I wrote as an interesting tech. It also gets Leech Life and Taunt and Trailblaze, and that should say T-Punch. Swords Dance, Flame Charge could really work. It gets like Fire Spin to trap things. Low Sweep I did end up using. There's like Power Trip boosting sets. There's all this stuff I was thinking about. Like, ultimately, most of the things in this section are not going to matter, like are not going to come into play, but it's just like interesting to see and get a total picture of what you have because you never know when you're going to need stuff. Like Keldeo Pain Split came into effect week 1. I think I wrote down Stone Edge. Like, I don't know. I was thinking like if I ever played Moltres, like it totally destroys Keldeo. Like it resists both stabs. Like it can burn me when I flip turn. But like you could tech Stone Edge in that game. Nobody had Moltres, but it was cool. Upper Hand was interesting. Is like against, I don't know, somebody who had a prow move to hit me. Like against Rillaboom could work, but I don't know. I didn't write much about Keldeo. Like I said, straightforward Mon. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, Keldeo is very straightforward. Anyways, there's all this stuff that's like me breaking down like all the cool things I can do with Mons. This was after I made the Zarina trade, how our speed tiers ended up. And this was the team for the bulk of the season when we had Mimikyu and Indeedee. And I really liked these speed tiers, like 142 above 110, like I said. Keldeo is really fast as well. Mimikyu eats up that 90 speed tier I liked. Indeedee filled a gap because Glalie at 80, but that doesn't really count. And then Zarina, these are a little bit packed, but that's okay. They're all kind of doing, you'll see later on, I was able to like speed creep with some of them, whatever. They're not always all coming to the same game. Graveler doesn't count, and then Claude all the way at the bottom. So I loved those speed tiers. That was really nice. Then I get into each week's breakdown. So, yeah. I'm going to get into each week and how I won it, unless your name's Ronan, and the thoughts I had and everything. So this is the way I break down a week. Like, this is week 1 versus East Bay Earthquakes. That's against Cole. And the initial thoughts is, like, just where I start jotting down. Because normally, right, like, you all know when you start doing a matchup, like, you get really into it right away and you have all these ideas bouncing off. The beginning's normally pretty, like, I guess you just get a bunch of ideas coming out of your head. So I start jotting them down. Like sometimes they're funny thoughts. Like I wrote with Cole, like, well, back at it again. I played him 3 weeks in a row. Like I played him the last season, the last week of season 3. I played him in the semifinal, and then I played him in week 1 of this. So I was like, if I wanted to just play Cole, I could have. I didn't need a whole draft league. I could just Wi-Fi battle. Like it was annoying to play him 3 times in a row. I'd like it spread out a little bit. Plus he's really tough. So first thing I noticed in this week was Entei was really rough for us. The immunity to intimidate from Ensign, was really bad. In retrospect, like I think a max defense Ensign can handle him well, but honestly, I was using Ensign to check Iron Crown, so he couldn't do everything. I said Primarina will either have Ice Beam Psychic or Psychic Noise. I said Primarina checks Keldeo so well, like checks both stabs. It's really good on the Spadef side, and then it can always just like flip turn out plus stab Moonblast everybody. So it made Keldeo a tough bring, but in the end, I had to bring it. I think Ensign comes as an Iron Crown check. Yeah, it's resist both stabs, can stop set up pretty well with Roar. I was like, Claude comes for Raikou and can maybe check Primarina. It depends on like if he's like spec Psychic. I think Primarina could break through. The Dragapult is coming for offense and speed. That pretty much sums it up for Dragapult coming every week. I figured out Primarina is going to be Psychic because of Keldeo and Claude. I don't remember if he actually ended up having Psychic, but obviously he would. This is when I noticed the team had a Psychic weakness, which made Scissor and Ensign better. So I was like, that's good and bad. And then I wrote, and I talked about this in my video, but I'm 8-0 in week 1 games. I'd played 8 seasons up to this, and I never lost week 1. I said, I always use something I'm excited to try. For this week, that was Banded Terra Ghost Dragapult. Something that feels broken, which was just like Max Spadef Claude, and then I don't try to do too much. Like, you don't know your team that well yet. Like, just try to use what makes sense and don't go too much out on a limb, which I did with only one Pokemon. Then I start making sets. So I get my head in the calc and start doing a bunch of stuff. So Dragapult, this is a simple Dragapult set. Like Adamant, 172 speed, I'm sure is just, 1 point faster than Raikou. The rest goes into HP for random bulk, and then the moves were simple. It was just Terra Blast Ghost, which was the one I was planning on using. Psychic Fangs, Darts, and U-Turn are like its only physical moves after that, except like Sucker Punch, which I don't like having on choice sets. So I noticed like Ghost moves went really well into his team. Like the only check for it is Umbreon, who gets like absolutely hammered by a choice band U-turn, so that's where that came from. And then the other resist is freaking Squawkabilly, which I didn't think he was going to bring. So I was like, okay, Banded Bolt looks good. Plus, I just want to use it. It's week 1. Let's go. I did write. It looks like I did have Sucker at some point, but I changed to Psychic Fangs because I wanted to have a way to break screens. I don't know why. I just felt like Cole was going to bring screens against me at some point. I kind of thought that the last like 3 times I played him, but it never happened. And then we were Infiltrator for the same reason, to help with screens, because obviously that ignores it. Normally on the physical sets, I have like a way to ignore Intimidate with Clear Body, but I didn't think Squawkabilly was coming, so I was like, I don't think I need it. So every week when I try to make something, this is something I've done recently. I can't remember if I started this last season or this season, but I think toward the end of last season, I came up with this like, I'll show it on screen after when I edit it. These like 9 tenets that I like to have. I call them for a team, and it's like a really good, a well-built team in a draft league scene anyway has these 9 things in my opinion. And it's hazard removal, hazard setting, momentum, phasing, screens removal, priority, setup, a trick play of some kind, and then speed control. If you can get as many of those 9 things into a team as possible, then that's really good. Fortunately for me, having Dragapult be so fast, he was a form of... Normally with speed control, I mean like either Trick Room, Tailwind, or Choice Scarf, or Sticky Web. But just having the fastest Pokemon or 2 in the game is also like constitutes speed control, so that's what Polt was doing here. Let's see. Then I had, this is the, if I highlight in yellow, that means it was the MVP of the week, and then if it's in orange, I guess it was the heat of the week for me. This Keldeo set was the one I really stretched on. I was having trouble switching into Entei and like self mocks, and I was like, I gotta do something. So this is like a max defense, bold natured with a little bit of Spatak EVs and very fast Keldeo. I talk about it. I think I talked about it that week, but I normally go all HP first before I invest in any defense, just because that's like an opinion. But for me, like when you look at the calcs of max defense versus like if I just had max HP versus max defense, the physical hits would do like 3% more damage, but the special hits would do way less. Like it's like 8 to 10% less. So for me, the overall plus minus of having max HP versus max in one of the defenses is way better to be max HP, except in this one case where you want a pain split. So I was like, okay, I'll try to use pain split and make this weird set without max HP. And it looks like it takes about 25 from Adamant Banded Sacred Fire. So I'm like, okay, that's really good. That can hang around with pain split. We're still walled by Primarina, so we're just gonna have to flip turn anyway. So I kind of liked it. Yeah. In the end, I changed it to have just defense versus HP. So this was the heat of the week. It worked well and it did its job. The Max Def Clodsire is there for Primarina and Raikou. This Incense set, 52 speed was like, let's see if I wrote it here. I don't remember what it was for. Speed creep something. If I look at the speed tiers. Oh, it's to avoid the speed tie with Primarina. Yeah, I wanted to hopefully fast U-turn on that thing. Just in case he or have the option to U-turn. Because if he doubles, then the U-turn gives me the momentum. And if he doesn't, I still U-turn then can make my switch. But yeah, mostly this was here to check Iron Crown. At the time, me and Cole both thought Iron Crown was better than it is. So I was really scared of it. Hey, yo, Crown is a problem. Yeah, it's so bulky. Like, the knock was only doing like 89. And I just, to no bulk, I didn't know it was that bulky. So I wanted to have Aurora and then Terra type Ghost in case I really had to, like after it sets up, like if I somehow activate a weakness policy or, agility's up alongside that and starts calm minding, like that's really scary. So I wanted a phaser, plus that's one of those 9 things I really want. Thunderous, no item because I was running physical Thunderous. I thought that was cool. I got its speed all the way down to Entei max. I ignored his Tornadus Eye, who speed ties, because it was like, this thing beats that in a vacuum anyway, and I didn't think he was going to bring it. Yeah. Oh, no item was also cool because it stopped Poltergeist from Decidueye. Yeah, that's awesome. And I figured if Decidueye came, it'd be physical because otherwise Claude eats it. Yeah, that makes sense. He doesn't have a lot of knockoff, but the first time Donphan is in, I figured that would make a lot of sense. So there was multiple reasons to run no item, plus outside of just charging up or boosting up the acrobatics damage. I brought Arboliva. This is Arboliva's one and only game. I brought it with a Choppleberry. This was to help because Donphan was an issue. As I wrote, we take 2 Ice Spinners from Donphan if he's Adamant Max. No boosting item, which I expect Heavy Duty Boots, which he was, I think. No, he was Mental Herb. He thought I was going to taunt him turn 1 or something. Like that could happen. So, yeah, and I also wrote, not gonna lie, Como was a bit of a problem, which it was in the match. So hopefully he gets caught by this because I have a Luring Voice, which was a new move at the time, and I wasn't sure he'd know I'd have it. In the end, I forgot it, or I didn't know that this was a sound move. Obviously, a Luring Voice sounds like a sound move, but I remember he was soundproof on his Como, so he didn't know it was a sound move either. And after we determined this interaction, I think, and we were like, oh, that would have been horrible for me. And he wouldn't have even known, he wouldn't have done it on purpose, but I would have been like, oh, sweet, I caught the Como with a Choppleberry, I'm going to kill him with a Luring Voice, then does nothing. That would have been awful. So yeah, sometimes I write down keys to the match. I wrote keep Claude and Dragapult around, which is prophetic because they were the last 2 Pokemon I had left. I said the longer the game goes on, the better they are, which was true. I said we have some massive checks to his guys, like Instant for Crown's a great check, Claude for Raikou's a great check. So if they come, look to bait out tricks from them on the first or second interaction, that is exactly what happened. We'll talk about that in a second. I said if he brings Hazard, that sucks, but we have to deal with it. I don't like Tentacle in the matchup, and I couldn't fit Scissor. Scissor just allowed in Raikou, or not Raikou. Well, yes, Raikou as well, but mostly it was about Entei. And I was just like, man, I cannot have that coming in more. Oop, I do not want to zoom in on this. So I didn't want to bring Scissor, so I just had no removal, which is a cardinal sin for me. I never do that, but for one, it was he never brings hazards against me, but yeah. And sometimes I have an I expect portion where I talk about sort of the things I thought would be there. Donphan with Heavy Duty Boots and Spin is a must. He did have spin, but it ended up being Mental Herb. I expect Como, but I had no idea what set because that thing can run anything. If I were him, I'd be Bandit Entei because of the Intimidate immunity. And E-Speed Terra Normal, a chance for late game sweep. Fortunately, he was Boots, so a little bit weaker. Yeah. Then in the end, after the match is over, I always write down what they brought in their poker pace so I can look at it later, potentially for rematches. And then I write down what happened in the game, which is basically just match results that we post in Discord, but with the moves too. Just a little bit more data. I got the 2-0 win that made us 9-0, all time in week 1. So yeah, the story of this match was Dragapult was like amazing. I Terra'd Ghost really early, so I popped Terra first. He did bring Raikou. I was like, what is this? Because Claude just walls that thing so bad, and he did end up bringing a trick for it. He was trying to be like Terra Blast Ice physical Raikou, and he messed up the EV, so he was special anyway. But I also switched in Incin on the turn. He Terra Blast Ice, so I totally caught him, which he claims, or he says he was going to be Terra Blast Ground, which is the problem with Incin covering Claude sometimes. They share that ground weakness, but he changed it because of suggestion from Sin, so he blames that on Sin, but ultimately it's his decision. So fortunately he wasn't, because if he was Terra Ground there, he would have caught Incin. It would have been tough. I still think it still seems like Polt was going to win in the end. Once I got rid of his Scarf Como with Keldeo, that was a big KO. Like Polt was just like killing everything with Terra Blast Ghost. The only thing I needed to chip on was Entei, who did have a roll to KO from full anyway, but I think it was only like 1/16th. And he ended up missing a Stone Edge, which was a 50-50 to KO Incin. And Incin got a knockoff on it, which was enough chip for Polt to sweep in the end, so he got the last 3 KOs. So that was a little bit of fortune there, but in the end, we like ran it through the scenario. Had he hit the Stone Edge and KO'd, it was like, I can just come in with Polt and U-turn, that'd be enough chip, so he'd have to swap out there. I can I can try that a couple times, and all I need is for one time for him to stay in, and I can use my other sacks to win. So I think I would have won anyway, but it definitely made it a guaranteed win after he missed Stone Edge. So that was nice. After the game, sometimes I do some match calcs. Like once I have their Pokepaste and their team, I can look at stuff like Donphan needed 2 of the lowest rolls to live Acro into U-turn from Thundurus, but after the Acro roll, U-turn always KO'd. Like I was curious if those 2 things KO'd during the game, blah, blah, blah. So I was looking at all this stuff, and it just gives me a better picture of like what would have happened. Then we got into week 2 playing Zjayne. Yeah. Colt's build was one of my worst of the season. Like it was missing like 3 of the 9 things I want. Didn't have hazard removal, priority, or setup, which is bad. So yeah, we're still learning our team at that point. Then we played Zjayne, like I said. So then we roll into week 2. That was a really big win for me. Like I know Cole's one of the best coaches in here. He obviously won the league the last 2 seasons prior, so getting that win to start off week 1 was huge. Then we went into week 2 playing Zjayne. Yeah, I said normally playing teams like this, like a slightly more hyper offense teams that have like Weavile and Iron Boulder. That doesn't make it hyper offense, but 2 really strong things at the top. I spelled iron wrong. Most of my teams would get outsped by both of those, but this season we have Dragapult, so that was amazing to look at. I said Incin's coming to block the Grafai parting shot. That's cool. Rocks are really good because they hit Rotom Heat and Weavile, so I wanted Rocks. I wrote Claude should be able to shut down Suicune and Clef setup with Haze, so that was amazing because those 2 things setting up are always scary. Scissor struggles with Rotom Heat and even just Suicune, but the priority was gigantic for revenging Weavile and Boulder. This was a huge match for Scissor, and it was good for Hydrapple, which I learned later on. So then I got into the sets. Dragapult was just like, I wanted to try special, so I went on the special side here. Dragapult didn't hardly get in the game. I think I had to be... Yeah, modest max. It's speed tied Weavile, but I was like, we never want to be in against Weavile anyway, so I just ignored it. Like, it was like, okay, it's fine if we speed tie. Plus, he had no reason to be max speed Weavile, so I was like, I didn't want to be timid with like a bunch of bulk. I'd rather be modest, especially because Polt only has 100 base special attack. It's weaker on the special side, so I was like, no, I'm going to be modest and just deal with it. He had no, and then whenever I was special, I was Infiltrator, so yeah. Clodsire almost always is Black Sludge, and then Water Absorb to help with the Suicune thing, and then having Hayes to make sure I don't lose to Clef, and Suicune setup was big. He was also my rock setter, which I talked about. Incineroar was heat of the week. This Incineroar set, man, is one of the sets of the season. Like, it was so amazing. Like, low sweep is a 75% chance to OHKO max HP Weavile, which whenever you can click a move like low sweep to OHKO is better than any other move, because like if something else comes in, it helps the next switch because I've lowered their speed. I sped crept Corviknight by 2 points, hence the 68. The HP defense and nature means we take 99% max from an adamant max attack plus 2 Weavile. So he would only have plus 2 if he SDs on the switch and he's clear amulet. Then I have like, or if he's not clear amulet and he's life orb, which does more damage, but you get intimidated, he only does 96.5% max with low kick from adamant Weavile, which he's probably going to be jolly. And so I said, if he's boots, it means we should always, us being boots means we should always be at 100% for the first interaction. Yes. And then if he's not SD or low kick, we just eat its life, which he ended up being neither of those things, I think. I talked about how much Corv can take from a Flare Blitz, should always 2-hit KO. I didn't want to do it because I need it. This thing's here for Weavile. It was just in a pinch, you always need to have ways to take down Corviknight, because sometimes you just look up and your team can't KO Corviknight. So, while I would not risk it, the speed also gives us a better chance to outspeed Golurk. Yeah, that was cool. I prefer Parting Shot over U-Turn because I don't expect him to know how the clear amulet thing works. Mirror Armor will protect Corv from the stat drop, but Instant still gets to switch out. So I did some research into how that interaction works. Scissor Protective Pads. This is the first time I ran Protective Pads on Scissor. It would not be the last. Great Revenger for Weavile and Boulder, I already talked about. U-Turn's going to be clicked most of the time because of Corv and Suicune just eat it up, but SD's only there if like those guys are really low and it gets late. And it also had Defog for a chance to remove hazards, which is amazing. And it was a great switch to Hydrapple, like resist the dragon, double resist the grass. It doesn't get any fire moves, so unless he's Terra Fire, like he can't hit us very well. And we can always U-turn. We should be able to fast U-turn. We're much faster. So this thing was great for Hydrapple, which ended up coming. Then Thundurus, the MVP for the week, was Choice Specs. So here's the thing about what I always say. If you don't have a water type and a ground type, you don't have a team. Like, I heard someone say that on a YouTube video like freaking 8 or 10 years ago, and it's just true. Like, it's not true of every 6 you have to bring has to have both, but like your draft league team needs to have both, and they need to be legit. Like, and the reason you need to have a legit ground type is because specs electric types will just eat your life. Like, I don't care if you have a dragon grass type that can eat the hit like Hydrapple here. Like, you're gonna get Volt Switch to death. So when I saw his team had weak ass Golurk for its ground type, I was like, all right, specs Thundurus time. So already in 2 weeks, I ran Thundurus special and physical, which was awesome. Yeah, and Thundurus was coming. It had to be coming a way to hit really hard anyway, because like Corviknight and Suicune were weak to electric moves, and they're so bulky. I was like, I'm bringing it. And then the two other things that come in, like Clef and Hydrapple, are weak to Sludge Wave. I was like, this thing is Thundurus is weak, and it was. Got some calcs in there. Scarf Keldeo was there as a way to revenge like Boulder if it's not booster speed and Weavile. Boulder ended up being booster speed and Weavile was choice Scarf, so it wasn't faster. Neither of those things, but that was the idea there. Plus, Keldeo on paper just eats Weavile's life. Like, it resists both stabs. Like, if you have low kick, Keldeo doesn't weigh that much. Like, so Keldeo was amazing for this matchup as well. Honestly, like, this Zjayne matchup felt like unlosable. Like, the way my team matched up into his was so crazy that I was just like, I cannot lose this thing. And it felt that way in the game too. Like, Zjayne's a great battler, but there was just nothing he could do. I wrote about what I expect. Max defense, Rocky Helmet, Corviknight. It wasn't max defense, but it was Rocky Helmet. Suicune didn't end up coming. I thought it'd come for Keldeo, but offensive Weavile, yeah, I was there. Boulder, out booster speed, outspeed Dragapult, yeah, that was there. Yeah, so the story of this match was like, this was a showcase of how you can momentum kills when you're in the vortex. Like, I got rocks up pretty easily early on, right? And then Corviknight has to come in a defog, and Corviknight, me and Cole figured out a long time ago, like, just gets owned by the electric flying types. Like, Kilowattrel, both Thunduruses, Zapdos, all of them, like, They resist Brave Bird, they resist Iron Head, they resist Body Press, they resist U-Turn. Like, there's just no way for Corviknight to do anything to those guys. And they hit him back super effectively. And so I was like, okay, I get Rocks up. He comes in with Corviknight. Thundurus comes in. I Volt Switch, and the Vortex is on. Like, if he goes Hydrapple, I Volt Switch on the Hydrapple. Then I go out to Scissor, who threatens a Hydrapple Oko with U-Turn. He's got to go back to Corviknight on the U-Turn, and because I'm pads, you're never going to Rocky Helmet chip me. Then I'm back out the Thundurus, and eventually, like, normally when you're in the Vortex like this, where you're getting hits and they're not, like, they will eventually try something else, and normally it's on the second turn anyway, the second iteration. And so in this game, the second time Thundurus was in front of Corv, I Sludge Waved, which is safe, even though, like, I can't hit Corv. Like, as I said, Corv can't do anything to Thundurus, so I Sludge Waved into the incoming Clefable. I got, like, a good roll, like it was a 20% chance to Oko or something, and it did. Didn't really matter, because I'd kill it on the next turn anyway. But, yeah, that was just a chain reaction. Then from there, there was, like, nothing he could do with every time Thundurus was in, someone was taking a Volt Switch. I was right, he didn't bring Golurk because it's trash, so the Volt Switches were free. And his team was whittled down to where I think he only got one kill. I kind of gave him Claude, so I could get Rocks up again after Corv was down, and then it was just a matter of time. So yeah, that was a 5-0. That was an easy one. This was a very well-built team, but it was easy because the matchup. Nothing Zjayne could really do there. That was like, it just happens sometimes in draft. I didn't bring screens removal, and I didn't bring any trick plays that week, which is whatever. I mean, I didn't need a trick play, that's why I didn't have it. And then screens removal, like I did have Infiltrator, Dragapult, so yeah, it was whatever. Then we get into week 3. And because of this PDF, this speed tier's up here when it's supposed to be down by Taco's name. But okay, week 3. I wrote a lot about week 3. I tried really hard for this match. The last 2 seasons, I tied for first in seeding, but I lost out due to head-to-head, which I still stand by. Like, I love that tiebreaker, because if you beat the guy, you deserve to be ahead of him. That's how I feel. Like, who gives a shit about differential in that case? And I knew Taco. So this season, I was like, okay, I'm 2-0. I really want to get the 1 seed. Like, Taco is one of the best coaches in here. He might be up at the top at the end. So if I don't get this head-to-head, it's going to be hard to get the 1 seed. So I was like, don't mess this up again for the 3rd season in a row. Like, beat the guy you need to beat. So I tried really hard for this match. Yeah, and he did end up being the 2 seed, so it's a good thing I beat him. Okay, despite not being super evident, like, it was there a little bit in the prep doc, I put in a ton of time to get phasing options for this season. Like, Roar, Ensign, and Unaware and Haze on Claude were huge aspects of the draft. Like, in my draft career, I usually have had a lot of success in, like, longer, drag-out, balance type matches. As you guys know, that's sort of my style. Where I sometimes get caught up, where I get caught is with setup. Like, I lose to setup a lot. At the times that I lose, it seems to be setup a lot of the time. So I was like, okay, I finally have the tools to combat this, and it was on full display in this match. Like, this match is in my opinion, is maybe my best played match of the season. One of, for sure. And it was it's a masterclass in, like, phasing and making sure the guy doesn't set up on you. Like, I hazed his Gouging Fire like 4 times, which was just because he kept trying to Dragon Dance, but still, I would not let it happen. I roared it twice. Like, I was just like, I'm not losing the setup. And even then, it was still close. Like, if he got it in the right time, it might have beat me. So that's just how dangerous Gouging Fire is. But yeah, and at this point in the season, I'd come to really believe in, like, specs and banded sets. Like, I myself am not very good at setting up, so it's bad on both ends. Like, I lose to it, and I'm not good at using it. So I prefer the immediate power of, like, specs and band, and you just have to sack up, and people are afraid to use it because, like, oh, what if I click the wrong move? I can't change. Like, well, click the right freaking move. So I had specs Keldeo, who was in prep was, like, the best against his team of anybody, and then I had, I think, banded Scizor because I just wanted a really good way to hit Tinglu, because that thing scares the crap out of me. Yeah, so at this point, counting this build, I'd run those items, like specs or band, 4 times already in 3 weeks. So yeah, I was big on those. And then yeah, we got into it. I had everything except trick plays. Of my 9 things I want, I had everything except trick plays this week. I wouldn't classify anything in here as a trick. So but yeah, pretty much everything covered, which was really good. One of the best builds of the season, which made the finals rematch really hard because it was I didn't want to change anything. I was like, this seems perfect, but I did end up changing some stuff. We'll get there when we get there. As you can see, this draft doc is 61 pages, so you're starting to see how insane I can be about draft. I'm very into it. I live for this shit. Okay, Dragapult was the MVP this week, and then the heat of the week was Claude, just because the Haze thing. Yeah. I thought about Mimikyu for a second with red card as another way to phase, but ultimately I didn't like it. Okay, so yeah, we won that match 4-0. That was a huge win. Dragapult ended up getting a mini sweep at the end. Serena kept off the rocks. Like, Keldeo hit a Hydro Pump it needed to hit. Clodsire, the thing about Clodsire is sometimes it's a little passive, but Haze allows it to make sure that at least it doesn't get set up on. It did that. Dragapult picked up 3 KOs. Yeah, everyone did what I wanted it to do in that week, and that was a huge week, and that sort of propelled us forward for the rest of the season. So after that, we were the 1 seed, and we held on to it the rest of the season. I think Taka was 1 going into this via differential because we hadn't played yet. But after this week, it was all mine, and I never let go of it, which was cool. Then week 4, it was another big match. Playing Sin, like, despite Sin's slow start to the season, I think he was maybe 2-1 or he was 1-2 at this point, but he also beat Zjayne with some freezes, which may or may not have changed the outcome of the match. But so he didn't have like a great start to the season. He ended really strong, but I knew, I'm like, Sin is, he'd be a top threat. So it was back-to-back try-hard weeks. I also immediately hated this matchup. Like, I actually believe Sin's team gave me the most trouble in prep of anybody all season. I hated prepping for this match. I didn't even find his team to be all that good, to be honest. Like, Sin's teams are usually very top-heavy, and this one was no different. Like, you know, he almost had 4 guys with 10 kills. He had 3 guys with 10 kills, and then another dude with 8 or 9, I think 8. And it's like, that was the bulk of his team. Like, if you can beat those guys, you're going to win. But I don't even think he liked his team that much this season, but it just matched up tough for me, similar to like when Zjayne played me. Like, I just didn't like the matchup. He had so many physical attackers with Lando, Cinder, Ogerpon. They all hit Zarina hard with U-turn, so I was like, Zarina's like a no-bring. His 2 special attackers hit Zarina super effectively too, with like Ninetales and Tornadus. Like, Zarina was just a hard no. I was riding the high of Ensign stopping gouging fire, so I kind of ran it back to help with Dragonite this week with Roar. Even though I did sniff out him bringing Banded, like, I thought if he watched the Taco match that he would be like, okay, Nick's really ready for setup this season. And Sin did end up running Banded Dragonite. He said that wasn't why, though. Yeah, ultimately, I was able to find a hole in his team. Thank God. And I don't know if I wrote it down here just on the set itself, but the big hole in his team was he's crazy weak to Psychic. Like, non-resist, 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 non-resist. Steel type, but half poison, so non-resist. Dragonite, non-resist. Metacham, Psychic type, but half fighting, so non-resist. Bellybolt doesn't resist. Charger Bug doesn't resist. Colossal doesn't resist, and he has no Dark type. So it was like, Psychic type moves are very spammable. So this wasn't DD's time to shine. This was the one of 2 matches, and DD came in. I was like, you're the man. I thought about Glalie for a second. His team was so weak to ice, especially freeze dry, but then it was just like, no, that thing sucks. Again, I thought about red card Mimikyu because Sin loves to set up, but yeah, I didn't end up running that again. And it actually took me a while to figure this thing out. As you can see, I tried a bunch of freaking sets and then crossed them off. Then Indeedee was the heat of the week and the MVP. Choice Scarf Indeedee was everything. I ran both Psychic and Psyshock, which ended up being huge because Psychic Tornadus could take over and over again with stupid. It was Assault Vest and Regenerator, so I needed Psyshock for that thing, and then I prefer to click Psychic on like everything else. And this match is categorized by like my 3 matches versus Sin. I played him season 2, 3, and 4. I beat him all 3 times. They're great examples of like balance versus hyper offense. In this match specifically, he kind of was more leaning toward balance, but normally Sin is very hyper offensive, and that's like the nature of my build is dealing with how to beat that. And normally, Cole and I believe you have to kind of match fire with fire sometimes, and playing HO, like if you try to out defense him, it's not going to work. But for me, when I played Sin, I'd play balance every time, and it worked. And I think it was just a good example of like, if you have a good balanced team, like you can make it work. You can beat HO teams with balance for sure. You just have, but it has to be very well balanced. and ours were when we played Sin all 3 times. So that was cool, and this one was no exception. What else happened in this match? Oh man, Dragapult busted him open pause early with banded Dragon Darts. Like he just had no switch for it. He didn't bring Ninetales, and he sacked Metacham to it. Then he brought in Colossal, and he used it to chip Dragapult a little bit. And in the end, he wasn't happy that he didn't set rocks. He wished he did that. But either way, it was like you either didn't set rocks and chip Dragapult, or you set rocks and you wouldn't have gotten the chip with that guy. I think it was Colossal. And then it would have made him harder to revenge. He ended up using his Terra on Pult as well. So Pult got 2 kills and kept up rocks and removed his Terra. However, it was like, man, all we killed was Colossal and Metacham. So the good guys were still there. And I remember in that moment, this was the first game, week 4, where Pult got KO'd early. And I remember feeling some worry in the moment because I was like, I didn't have him in the back as insurance. So I was like, all right, time to find out if the rest of the team can do it, you know. And I'll forever love this match for that. It felt like the rest of the team, like Dragapult did what he could at the beginning. He's like, all right, you guys finish it, and they were able to, so that was cool. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of switching. This game is sort of the opposite of Zjayne's. It was, in my opinion, it was a bit of a masterclass of how to beat momentum. Like Sin just U-turned constantly he U-turned with Cinderace, I think, once. He U-turned with, actually, I'm not sure if Cinderace clicked U-turn, but he U-turned with Torn like 6 times, I don't know. And it was just, and he U-turned with Lando. Like it was just a way to show that like momentum is not everything, and if you're not getting enough out of it, then it's not a broken thing. It's obviously amazing and a big aspect of Pokemon and a big part of my success, but it's not just totally broken. You just click momentum moves and you win, right? The last thing I want to talk about this match is Sin's unwillingness to click Heat Wave against Scizor will forever puzzle me. Like, during the match, I 100% thought he didn't have it after he U-turned so many times in front of Scizor. And I guess the complicating thing is, like, after he Terra Fairy'd, like, I was threatening Bullet Punch hits, but he was, like, it was pretty bulky Torn. Like, Bullet Punch was never going to OHKO, and, like, I had shown that I was defensive if he was calking. So, like, Bullet Punch would have done, like, half, and he kept U-turning or hard switching instead of Heat Waving the Scizor. So I was like, okay, he 100% doesn't have it. He keeps U-turning or hard switching. Like, if he had clicked Heat Wave on like 3rd or 4th Scizor Tornadus interaction, I would have thrown my switch through the wall. Like, I don't know why he didn't click it, or his unwillingness to click it, or just I guess his discipline in not clicking it. But in the end, I stayed in a lot, so he should have clicked it. It was just baffling to me. Like, I'll never understand that. But Sin gave me a brutal match. We only won 1-0. It was really close. I had like 40% left on Instant at the end, and he finally got Tornadus down, and we won the match. But yeah, so I was feeling really good at this point. I was 4-0. I beat 4 really good opponents. I mean, everybody this season was pretty good, so every win's valuable. But yeah, I was feeling super good. I was hoping to chip things down. So my plan was to punish his U-turns with Scizor, but he knocked on the first turn and got the helmet off, so that didn't end up happening. You see, for a brief moment, I was panicking. I even thought about like Scarf Serena triple Axel because he was so weak to ice, but I was like, that's freaking garbage. This is just awful. But yeah, we ended up winning. Yeah, close match. Blah blah blah. I get into week 5 against Palafins. Let me see. In that Sin match, I had all of the 9 things except setup. So yeah, that was a good build as well. In week 5 against Palafins, first things first, I played this match in a different hotel than I was staying in. As you guys know, I'm often on the road for work. Sorry, on the actual doc, these things don't cover up the words all the time. But just because I'm using it on the PDF, because it's like when I use Google Drive and OBS, it doesn't. It's kind of sketchy. But when I use it on like PDF reader, it's fine. But whatever, you're not going to see all the words. It is what it is. I'm going to post the doc after so people can see my prep doc. But yeah, I played this in a different hotel because my hotel Wi-Fi was just like not working. And I played in like a different hotel lobby because obviously I didn't have a room there. And there's just a bunch of people around me in the lobby. So that's why the sound's really bad in this video. But yeah, whatever you got to do to play the game. I had some thoughts here. You see, I thought about Mimikyu again, didn't come. Like I kept thinking about Mimikyu, but in the end, I just didn't like it in prep that much. With Mandabuzz, Milo looked like Thundurus will be important. That's similar to the Zjayne game, where it's like his bulky guys are weak to electric. The Keldeo speed tie with Terrakion and just above Iron Treads is interesting. I was thinking mixed Pult because I wanted to be special, but stupid lame ass Muck, as I said. But I ended up being Darts to hit Muck as well. He also added Mismagius right before this match, so that was annoying, but did add another speed tier that Keldeo was above. So this was kind of Keldeo's match. Scissors bad against Ogerpon, so I didn't like it. Ensign does well against Sinistra. He ended up... I thought he dropped it before the match. He did drop it for Mismagius, yeah, so Sinistra didn't end up coming. Top 4 guys are physical hitters. I said this could be a week without Claude. Plus Hat making Hazard difficult. Yeah, I think this is the first week I left Claude. In this match, I ultimately had all 9 things except Hazard setting. I didn't bring it because he has a magic bouncer. His team's not that weak to rocks, like whatever. You want it for Ogerpon, of course, but he has a good spinner, a good defogger, and magic bounce. So I was like, I'm not bringing it. And Claude looked bad anyway, and that's the only guy I had for Hazards at that point. So yeah, Instant came as the check for Ogerpon. I said, thank you, Soldier. You'll be switching into Ogerpon every time. And nothing else. He was max defense. I had Roar to deal with setup on Ogerpon. Or other guys in a pinch. Choppleberry to deal with like if he's low kick or superpower. So no matter what, we could take a hit. If he tears and superpowers on the switch, we can take one more even after he gets -1 attack. Low kick's only 80 base power, so that was cool. I wanted to be parting shot, but Milo's a good switch, so I didn't have parting shot for a second, but I added it on later, as you'll see. We do live a Terra Jolly +2 superpower after rocks with the Choppleberry, so yeah, this was a really good check to Ogerpon. Keldeo came Choice Scarf, bulky Choice Scarf. I did this with Keldeo a lot. Like, I just ignored the fact that I wouldn't outrun a Scarfer. Ogerpon's 2 points faster than this, and I expected it to stay faster in his prep, so like, if he gets a Trailblaze off, we're still not faster with Choice Scarf, so I was like, screw it, I'll just be bulky. Zarina was Heat of the Week. This was cool set. I worked really hard on the set. Yeah, I remember being in the calc for a long time with this Zarina. And yeah, it did a lot of stuff. You can see like all the things written here. There was just a lot of calcs that went into it. Thundurus, I tried Nasty Plot Thundurus, and now I've been physical, special, setup. Like I did so much with Thundurus this season, man. Dragapult was Spell Tag. I talked about the mix with Meteor and Darts. Didn't end up coming in very much. Assault Vest, Scizor, Spec Def guy for the week. But also good Revenger with Max Attack and Bullet Punch, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so yeah, at this point I was 4-0 against Palafins, so I was super confident going in. Like I'd played him 4 times, beat him 4 times, including twice in Season 1. We played in the finals. I also felt this was like his weakest team he drafted in the 4 seasons we competed, so yeah, it just felt like it was going to be a good match. We were 4-0 in the season. We were just rolling. This was the first time I really got to flex Keldeo's greatest weapon, which was its ability to hit on both the physical and special side with Secret Sword. So like Muck was a good check, but not to Secret Sword, which ended up happening. It perfectly 2-hit KO'd Muck on the switch with Secret Sword. Before the match, I was like, the only thing I felt could beat me was like one of those setup Hatterines that like has enough healing with Draining Kiss in the right position, Keyberry, whatever, to set up and beat you. And I was like, oh, you can't phase Hatterene because it magic bounces the Roar. And I didn't have Haze this week. Like Claude has Haze, but probably would die to Hatterene before it gets the Haze off. So I was like, man, what are we going to do? And I was sitting there and I was like, yeah, Parting Shot bounces back the magic bounce anyway. I was like, oh. Like I was literally in prep in the video talking about it. And I was like, wait, that would be perfect. Like, yes, it bounces the Parting Shot back onto Incineroar, but it makes Hatterene switch out. I was like, oh my god, it's a form of phasing. It was so cool that I came up with it in the moment, like 5 minutes before the match. Freaking did a egg move breeding on Instant to get it before the match and got it on. He didn't end up bringing Hatterene anyway, but it was a really cool idea, I thought. And it was like game knowledge to help me figure that out, so I thought that was cool. Okay. Then we got Cammy in week 6. Oh yeah, so we won that match pretty easily. It was 5-0. I forget who got a kill. Yeah, Mandabuzz like somehow got a Toxic off on Thundurus, and Mismagius with Scarf brought him down low, died to Toxic. But other than that, 5-0 win, easy win. Week 6 versus Cammy. She was the new girl at the time. She hadn't played a match. Sometimes those are tough because you just don't know anything about them, but you always have to think like they don't know anything about you either. So like, get over it, you know. In this match, I brought everything except speed control. Like I still had Dragapult, but I didn't have a Scarf for her. And I don't know, I forgot who else I brought. And she had Sneasler and somebody else fast. Is that right? Or just Sneasler? Oh, well, Kilowattrel, Sneasler, and Bug Trio, and I only had Dragapult. Yeah, so I kind of felt the speed control was on her side, but whatever. It was fine. I didn't need it, really. Cammy had a pretty subpar team due to taking over from Dewey, who left her a really bad team. She did have some Pokemon that can win games on their own, though, so my focus was stopping them, and those things are specifically Clefable, Volcarona, and Sneasler. So I was like, as long as I can stop those things, I'll be fine. I always thought Mimikyu was interesting for draft, and now was its time to shine. This was Mimikyu's one game. The red card set is classic, like red card Mimikyu, because normally the scare with the red card is the weakest form of phasing, but it is a form. And the scare with it normally is like, well, if you just get O-code, the red card doesn't activate. With Mimikyu, you're guaranteed to activate it because of its ability. So I remember back in Gen 7 when it released, a lot of people were running red card Mimikyu. So I sort of brought that set back for the Sneasler. I was hoping she'd be the Unburdened set as opposed to like the Banded Poison Touch. She was. Came in, she SD'd, then she hit Mimikyu and got forced out. So after that, Unburden, was done. Only one time activate. So it did that, which was cool. The other problem was Volcarona and stopping that, and then of course set up Clef. Second time playing Clef this season. Unaware Claude handled those things easily. Like Volcarona can't do anything to set up Claude. Like just totally stops it. And for Clef, like Unaware is pretty good. Plus I can hit it super effectively. And yeah, it just felt like like I said, the only threats to my team were those like just somehow getting in the right spot and setting up, and it was just like, well, I had the tools to beat him. So with those two, Mimikyu and Claude anchoring the team, I felt very confident that the offense could get the rest done, and it did pretty easily. I used the Terra on Pult again. I Terra'd offensively every time this season. Like not a single Terra was on a defensive guy. Yeah, so it went pretty well. This is speed tier for Ronan. The speed tier charts are like not where they normally are in the doc, so they're covering some stuff, but whatever. When I release the doc later, you guys can see it without it looking ugly like this. But yeah, in the end, I tried to dance around Magnezone a little bit too much. She got 2 KOs, but other than that, it was a stomping. Week 7 versus Ronan. Aha, we come to it at last. With this build, I didn't have hazard setting or phasing. Those are the only 2 things I was missing. Ronan, I wrote it here. He's the last guy. He was literally the last Ronan. The last guy left with a winning record against me. Oops. I wrote down he definitely has some speed tier issues. His 3 favorite mons are 80 to 85. Like maybe they're not his favorite, but 3 of his strongest. Like Mamoswine, Goldango at 84, Mamoswine 80, and Samurott at 85. I was like, well, they're all packed right there. Like I should use somebody to revenge them easily. And Indeedee was the 85 speed tier that I had. I didn't like Mimikyu in the matchup, so I was like, okay, Indeedee, come on. But unfortunately, didn't have a great matchup against them. Like, yeah, Shadow Ball for Goldango, it's not going to do that much. Like, Alluring Voice for Samurott, like, it's not great. And then just like regular psychic moves to hit Mamoswine. So I'm like, it's not amazing, but it's a good revenger, so I brought it. I brought Czar to deal with spikes, and hopefully I brought it banded so it can because I thought, if Goldango comes in to block it, then I can hit it really hard if I call the switch. I wrote last time he pieced me up with Typhlosion. I need to see if Claude is required for that. It was not. But yeah, I brought, this is a bad instant set because at level 50, it should never be broken up into 4 stats. It should either be 3 or 5, because with 4, I think 148 attack is a wasted EV. I brought 12 speed to hopefully speed creep the P2 and Wheezing G. I think I did speed creep the P2 successfully, so that was cool. Dragapult took me a while to figure out the set. I went with Twisted Spoon to boost Psychic Fangs. I really thought Wheezing was going to... Oh, yeah, I wrote... Okay, yeah. Let me just read what I wrote about this match, like with Ronan. This is the one I lost. Ronan kept me from having the perfect season. Yeah, so at this point, I had a comfortable lead in the 1 seed. Like, I could lose this match and still stay at the top because Ronan had 2 losses. So 1 loss, he doesn't jump me, and then Taco still only had one, but I had the head-to-head, so even if I lost, I stayed at the top. So I guess that could have led to some complacency, but I don't think so. I still tried very hard for this match, and after all, Ronan was the last guy I hadn't defeated in here, so obviously I wanted to win. I was very fearful of Mamoswine going in, who isn't fearful of Mamoswine, and Wheezing, since my team was feeling a little bit heavy on the physical side at this point, because I was really preferring like physical pulp right now. That ended up not being a big deal later on. My team had a good split, but at this point in time, I was like, man, I feel like really physical, so I was scared of Wheezing. I also wanted to run physical Thunderous, so just added to the physical problem. Um, yeah. I really tried to exploit his three best mons. I talked about this 80, 84, 85 guys with Indeedee. I remember Ronan forfeiting a speed tie in our previous match. Like his Ogerpon Cornerstone sped tied my Lycanroc Dusk, and he didn't run Jolly Max. So I was like, he might not do that again. So I was hoping Samurott would be adamant or something, and it was. So Indeedee did outspeed all three except Mamoswine, who ended up being Scarf anyway. As you can see here when I scroll through, like I thought of many sets for this match, like a lot of them, and they just didn't end up coming. The two matches that were the most difficult for me to prep for were Sin and Ronan, and as you can see, those were the two matches that had a bunch of crosstown sets. So yeah. Upon reflection, I don't really love this build, but it was still good enough to snag a win. So the story of the match was like a lot of switching. I think someone in the comments was like U-turn city. I think Rein said that or something, which is what it was. We were both just switching a ton, double switching, U-turning, just chipping each other down. In the end, he got the better of me in the chip factor, and then I was forced to DD with Dragapult earlier than I'd want to. I had to use my Terra to do it. He Terra'd back to stop it, and then eventually the call was like, he brought in his revealed Scarf Mamoswine to revenge me with Ice Shard, which I was like, okay, having Ice Shard and Scarf is a little bit weird. And of course he knew, and I knew I had Queenly Majesty Zarina in the back, so I'm like, he's either doesn't have Ice Shard and he's just threatening it, so I switch out my Dragapult to get rid of the boost, or he does have it and I have to make the call, and I thought I could maybe still win even if he did have it, so I stayed in. He did have Ice Shard, ended up killing Dragapult, so that was a great bring by him, because bringing Scarf Ice Shard is hard to do, and he had it, and it ended up mattering. So Ronan definitely earned this win. All things equal, if he did knock off with his Mamoswine early in the match and it crit Scizor, and in the end it was Scizor versus Mamoswine, I Bullet Punched, did over half, he Earthquaked, and it killed. If he didn't crit me with knockoff, it would have taken like double max roll, like max roll, knockoff, max roll, Earthquake, in order for me to die there at the end. So in the end, the crit ended up doing me in. But that doesn't mean like, however, like the rest of the game could have played out differently if he didn't crit me at the beginning. Like maybe I would have used Scizor earlier on one of those pivot turns, and then I would have been chipped anyway. Maybe Ronan would have played toward a different end game. So it happened so early, I can't say like I would have won without the crit. And at the end of the day, it did crit, so who gives a shit, right? Like Ronan beat me. This was my one loss. Like, you know, in the end, this was the one hill I couldn't climb. Like I've won 4 draft league seasons in 3 different leagues. 3 of those seasons, I only had 1 loss. And so I was never able to go undefeated. I just couldn't do it. So it's really hard in Pokemon. Like, you guys know, this game's brutal. And in the end, it was something I definitely couldn't do. So yeah, that was the Ronan match. That was our 1 loss this season. Then we played Kyce in week 8. This was sort of the bounce back match. Our best Pokemon, Dragapult, looked like the key to the match. And it was just like his team was so weak to Ghost. It was just spammable. Like, 1, Slowking is weak. Corviknight doesn't resist. Morgrem sucks and is frail. Everybody else, he doesn't have a normal type or a dark type of the remaining guys. So I was like, man, I could just spam. I was finally Specs Shadow Ball. Again, I was Pad Scissor for like Helmet Corv or Helmet Rotom. That made a lot of sense. Focus Sash lead Thunderous to hopefully catch a lead Ninetales A. Anytime I play a guy with Weather, I try to lead something that could potentially catch the Weather Setter on the first turn. Like Thunderous, you might think you have a good matchup if you're running Ninetales, but I do get Flash Cannon and then Oko's max HP. Like, does 100% min to max HP, so that was cool. Thunder's had nice moves in this game. Like Grass Knot did 99 min to max HP Tusk. That ended up mattering. Pad Scissor. Okay, let me just read what I have here. Like, I didn't have much initial thoughts written down here. That's not to say I didn't prep for this match. I just did a ton of it, like writing it down on a piece of paper for some reason, like when I was flying or whatever. So, yeah, I prepped for this one plenty. It's just not written down there. I desperately wanted to get rocks up because the team was so weak to them, but Kyce clearly did his homework and he brought Corviknight with the intention to make sure they stay off. So, even if Corviknight came, he obviously has spin on Tusk, which he didn't bring this game to, so he has good removal. But even if Corv came, I needed the free turns where he defogged to get in Thunders more often. So, like, it didn't matter. Like, I wanted rocks up bad. So this was another example of when I needed rocks for the match, but I hated Clodseire's matchup. Like, he's weak to Ninetales. He's weak to Kyurem. And, like, Kyurem can just come in for free. He's weak to Tusk. Like, weak to Rotom Wash. Corviknight eats its life in terms of, like, making sure no damage is done. Even Slowking can tech Psyshock and beat it. Like, I didn't like Cloud's matchup at all, but I wanted rocks, and it was good for Volcarona. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll friggin' bring it. But this was where I was getting annoyed with the he's the only rocker thing. The initial feeling was that Scissor had a huge matchup, like resisting both of Kyurem's moves and stopping Veil with Defog and resisting both of Alolan Ninetales moves. But pretty quickly I knew he couldn't do it all, so instead Incin was at least like the first switch to Kyurem, and Scissor could just do like the Veil stuff. And I really want to highlight like the Heat of the Week Incineroar set here. Like this Incineroar set is what I love about draft. Like I even underlined it. Like the speed creep on Corviknight. As I said earlier, I already played Corviknight. Like I know sometimes you can get into matches where you just can't kill it. It literally is how I lost Season 3 last season. Like I think Cole's Corviknight got the last like 2 or 3 kills because I just couldn't kill it. Like if you don't have something to hit it super effectively or really hard, like it can just run away with things. And so I was like, just in case, I want Incineroar to be 1 point faster than no speed Corv, which they normally are. So I sped crept it a little bit, 1 point faster than no speed investment Corviknight, and it ended up happening. Like I called the switch to Corviknight on the Incin because he was like running out of things to switch to. Hit him with Flare Blitz, and he thought he'd be faster and roost off and just let me die to my own Flare Blitz recoil, and I was 1 point faster, and ended up KOing him, and it won me the match. Like without that, we were either going to tie, and the timer would have went to percent of HP remaining, or I could have lost. So this was a really cool moment for me. It was like I'm literally getting a call from Cole right now. This is what I mean by draft has given me the chance to like express myself creatively. Like this speed creep, I've always sped crept in the lower tiers. Like I have a few examples that I'll show you guys when I edit this video later, and I'll edit them in. But like even in my first season, I had sets where I did that. Like, and that was I barely knew what I was doing. Like I've always felt it was worth it to speed creep with lower speed guys over running like blindly max defensive sets. Like most of us know not to run like blindly max speed. Like you should take some off to the next fastest thing and then add that back into bulk. Like I think it's similar, not exactly the same, but similar on defensive sets. Like running blindly max defense like does not always make sense. And in this game, it made all the difference. Like this was such a me set, and the fact that it came to fruition is so important. Not to mention, Incin absolutely carried the team this game. Like it switched into like 2 or 3 future sites. It switched into Kyurem twice as the first switch. Like it roared him out one time. Well, no, I parting shot it, and that did enough to make him switch. Like obviously, I made Keldeo the MVP because without it, I couldn't have revenged Kyurem at the end, which was the final cap on the game, and like I needed Keldeo to continuously provide pressure on Kyurem. But what Incin did in this game is such an Incineroar game and just so amazing. Like it knocked things off, it parting shot it around, it threatened Roar and had it there just in case. It Flare used its strong stab to kill something. Like it checked Kyurem because Intimidate for its physical set, and then it was Careful, very Spadef for its special set. Like it was Boots to avoid the hazards, which didn't end up going up. But like this was such an Incineroar set, and it makes me so happy to think and look back on it and watch. This is one of my favorite games of the season, if not my favorite. It went to timer, which is an hour. We won 4-2, and I'm very good at timer because I won a timer season in Gen 8. I won the timer season in MML Season 1. I won another timer season in Gen 8, except it was like bring 4 best of 3, so the timer didn't really matter that much. But like I know how to use timer. I know what the rules are at the end. Like, and I ended up using that to my advantage in winning this game. Not to mention the Incineroar set thing. Like, I just love this match, and honestly, Kyce earned a lot of respect for me in this match. Like, I wasn't quite sure how good Kyce was yet. Like, we saw he had an easier beginning half of the season, and he had started to slip a little bit going into the back half because he was playing some of the tougher coaches. But man, he gave me a run for his money. Like, he made run for my money. He gave me made a ton of good plays over the hour that we played, and like his brings were good. And yeah, he really impressed me here. So it was a really fun match against a good opponent and someone who I think is going to do really well in the future here if he keeps it up. Yeah, in this game, I brought all the 9 things I like except for setup. So he just has too bulky of guy. It felt impossible to set up like Glow King or Corviknight's going to wall somebody. So I just didn't have that. But yeah, other than that, it was a really good build, a really good match. And it was our bounce back win after losing for the first time. Like, I really needed this win. After I won this match, I was like, it felt like I got to win this season. Like, it's just, that was everything I wanted. And moving forward, I had to just like finish the job. And then we go into week 9 and we play Mitch. Whoo boy. This might have been the second scariest matchup for me all season. I don't know, is this or Ronan? Mitch also always plays me tough. Like, this is the 4th time playing Mitch, and it always seems like he knows what move I'm going to click. Like, I think where Mitch struggles a little bit is in his build and his draft, but in his battling, his battle like senses are so good. Like, every time I watch him, I'm like, damn, like he knows what the other guy's going to do, or he knows a good play to make at certain times, and his battling is like definitely the best facet of his game. And so you might feel good during prep against Mitch, but once you get into the match, like it doesn't feel good. At least that's my experience with him. And yeah, this is Porygon Z's only match, but man, was he important. He was MVP of the match, and it was really big. I'm glad I brought him. This also felt like somewhat of a legacy game. Like, if Mitch beat me, we would have been 2-2 in our matchup head-to-head all time, so I really wanted to win the set. Like, during my prep for this match, I rewatched my Season 1 match against Mitch because I always clung to the idea that, like, I could have played better, I could have built better and, like, won that match, and then I would have had an undefeated season. And after I rewatched it, like, I liked my prep and I liked my play, and Mitch just beat me. Like, he outplayed me and he had a good build. Like, I always respected Mitch, but I gained even more for him when I rewatched it. And it's something I wanted to call attention to because, like, for me, it usually makes it easier to rewatch things and like have a clairvoyant perspective on it. And like I was able to do that with this match and just come to the fact that it was like you weren't good enough to go undefeated that season. You weren't good enough to go undefeated the season before that when you only had 1 loss. And this season I wasn't good enough. Like, Ronan just straight up beat me. And so that was, like I said earlier, that was just the last mountain I couldn't climb in draft. Like, I've done everything in draft except for gone undefeated, and that's okay. Like, I just wasn't good enough to do that, you know, and I can live with that. Like, in the end, it's all about getting championships, but it's just a good thing to look at and reflect on and think, like, you know, sometimes your best isn't good enough, and that's okay. Like, there doesn't have to be an excuse. Like, sometimes your best just isn't good enough. Like, you guys see when most people lose in anything, but especially in Pokemon, people have a ton of excuses for everything. Like, oh, I didn't prep very hard. Oh, I got unlucky. Whatever. Those are stupid. Like, sometimes you just need to face the fact that your best isn't good enough. And for me, when I played Mitch in Season 1, my best wasn't good enough. And this season, when I played Ronan, I gave it my best, and it wasn't good enough, you know? So that's just how it goes. Again, this week, I also wanted to call highlight to, like, Incineroar was Heat of the Week with Air Balloon. Like, I asked Incineroar to take on so many good Pokemon. Like, I forgot to talk about how in week 5, like, at that point, normally there's like a captain on my team. Last season it was Gudra H. The season before that was Arcanine, and before that was Goldango. Like, it's normally just the guy I'm asking to do the most on the team and is getting the job done. Like, early on, it was clear Dragapult is the star of the team. Like, kill leader of the league, like, or at least it was up there all the time. Kill leader on my team, hardly getting KO'd, getting all the KOs, all the glory, but like that's not who the captain is necessarily. Like after week 5, I knew that Ensign was the captain because after week 5, the sets I made for Ensign were to check Iron Crown, Weavile. And then week 3 was to check Gouging Fire. Then it was to check Dragonite in week 4. Then week 5 was to check Ogre Pawn, Heart Flame. These guys I just mentioned are like 18, 19, 19, 20, 19. Like, and he's checking all those guys and getting it done, you know. And then in week 6, I finally ran him banded for once. Like, he got to be offensive 1 week. Good for him. Week 7, I asked him to check Goldango and Latias. Like, those are both 18ers, I think. Week 8, he was there to check Kyurem, maybe the best Pokemon on the tier list, and now he's here to check Excadrill, who is Mitch's kill leader and his most dangerous Pokemon. Like, Incineroar was freaking getting it done, dude. Like, I asked so much of him, and whatever I asked, he did, pretty much. And in this match, he got it done, too. Like, he did well. He got 2 KOs. This match, I think he beat... Well, he beat Excadrill, but I think it died to Life Orb damage, and then he survived a hit from Iron Moth on top of that in the red HP, like 6 HP or something, and Earthquake back and killed Iron Moth. Like, Incineroar's the GOAT, man. Like, I love that Pokemon. It was so amazing this season to use Incin. I recommend it to anybody, no matter what its points are. Mitch's match, I only didn't bring screens removal. I hadn't seen Mitch bring screens in 4 seasons, so I was like, whatever, I don't need it. This match had my best play of the season, I think. It was, there was this really difficult moment where, like, hazards were up, and I lost Serena early because Hariyama got in a tough spot in front of Claude, and I just needed somebody to deal with it, so it was Serena, and I lost my hazard setter in exchange for just chip on Hariyama. Like, I didn't even KO it. So the start was difficult. And then I ice beamed the Hippowdon with my Porygon Z, and I was Choice Scarfed, and he yawned. And rocks were up, and I was running out of health on everybody, and I was like, man, if he just starts roaring, like, everyone's going to get chipped. If he yawns on the switch, like, then that guy's going to get chipped or fall asleep. And I was just like, I need to take this chance to KO Hippowdon right now and Ice Beam and just deal with falling asleep. Even though I knew, like, Primarina could still come in and just take nothing. And I was like, but I'm going to take that risk. And so I Ice Beamed the Hippowdon. I got an 11 out of 16th roll in that KO, and it got him, and then I fell asleep, but that was all I needed to do. And it was, like, a very tough decision because if he just goes Primarina, like, I'm also cooked. But if he stays in, then it's really bad. So it just felt like a 50-50, and I made the right choice against an opponent who always feels like he's making the right choice against me. So that was a big moment for me, that Ice Beam KO on Hippowdon with Porygon. And then in the end, his team ended up getting chipped enough, and Clodsire was able to handle Superior with Unaware and stuff and get up some spikes. He rapid spinned him off, but Dragapult, there was enough damage done that Dragapult got it done in the end. But that was such a great match against Mitch. It ended up being 3-1 against Mitch, but he got sort of the last laugh because he was the one who beat me in the season. I could have gone undefeated, but Mitch was a great battler. I really loved playing him for 4 seasons, and he was a commissioner's dream. He was, like, never a problem, always pretty active, good coach. Like, so I can't say enough good things about him. And we had one last great match. Week 10 is against Rein. The theme of this match was just the take no risks game. Like, we really had such a good matchup on paper, and Rein was on a downslide at that point. He didn't even like his team. Like, it was like, all right, dude, we just gotta play well, bring a good team. Like, it should be easy. I brought everything except setup against Rein, so another good build. This game, the example for this game, I'm looking at the speed tier here, even though the week 10 matchup notes start down there. The theme of this game was he has bad speed tiers. I mean, they're just terrible. Like, Tauros is a subpar Pokemon. Like, Latios wasn't that good. He didn't like it. Pheasantipiti's not offensive, even though he was trying to run it that way. Furret's terrible, and then you finally get into some good Pokemon down at 86. Like, you just, like, Thundurus and Dragapult just looked so good in this match. It was pretty simple in that regard. Like, just save your fast guys. Like, you should be fine. And they did. He did have a decent plan to help with the speed control. Like, he was Scarf Swampert to be faster than Dragapult EV down to his fastest, Latias and Tauros. Like, if Dragapult was 1 point faster than them, he was trying to be 1 point faster with Scarf Swampert, which I thought was a ridiculous bring because, like, there's no guarantee I'm going to do that. And Scarf Swampert can't even catch max, like, most Dragapults unless I did do that exact speed tier. But I did do that exact speed tier, so he would have got me, but he EV'd it wrong. But the problem with that set was, like, he had to be jolly, and Swampert's not that strong. I don't even think knockoff KO'd, so it didn't end up mattering that much. Like, the matchup was just so bad. I don't think this was going to be close anyway. But he had a good idea with Scarf Swampert, which is crazy because in prep, Cole was like, what if he runs Scarf Swampert? I don't even know why he brought that up, but he sniffed it out somehow. I was like, I think I said, like, dude, he's not bringing Scarf Swampert, and then he did. Crazy. Finally, Incineroar got to take a break and just take on Cerulege. That's a joke because Cerulege is a demon and was the fire type I was gunning for during most of my prep this season, my draft prep. But and Rein was using it nicely. So yeah, Incineroar came another week where I had to check one of his best mons. Choppleberry again. Yeah, I did the 4 stat thing. I said, I wasted EVs on this idiot. I wrote that afterwards because, God, that was so stupid. I'm like so critical of other people doing that, and I did it twice this season. It's stupid. I think what happens is, like, I get max HP, I speed creep a little bit. Which one of these is wrong? 88 defense, I think. Is that right? Let me think for a second. 100 is correct, so 92 is correct. Yeah, so it should be 86 or 92. So what happens is, like, you get these first 3 that hit some benchmark, and you're like, oh, I'll just throw the rest in defense and, like, don't think about it. And it's like, well, it should have been 84 and then 4 Spadef or whatever. That would have been optimal. I hate when I mess that up. That's so annoying. The only other note I have for this match was I was definitely worried he would bring Heatwave on Pheasantipity for Scissor because it was such a good check. He led Pheasantipity against Dragapult, and he fucking, excuse me, sorry for cussing. He checked, he clicked Heatwave immediately, even in front of Dragapult, which I guess he's like, oh, he's going to switch, like Pheasantipity has the advantage. But, like, if I was just banded Psychic Fangs, would have KO'd, but, so that was a bold click. But I knew, I wrote down somewhere in here, or at least I had practiced, like because he has Heatwave, Scissor needs to not be the first switch, or at least if I come in, I need to double out because it's like he might have Heatwave on that thing. Oh, here we go. Good check to Fez, but we never Oko with Bullet Punch, and he does get Heatwave, so probably double on that first time. So I knew I had to be careful with Scissor coming in on Pheasantipity, and on turn 1, he clicked it, but I went to Claude. He missed a 95% accurate move, but it would have done, like, less than Black Sludge recover, so it didn't really matter. But I was like, man, that was kind of crazy, but why I wanted to bring this up is that, like, sometimes it's the right move to make hard predictions, like, really early, but especially against someone you may think is better than you, which I think Rein did feel that way. But you also need to earn those moments sometimes, like doing that right away, like maybe make the right play the first time, then capitalize on it later. That's just what I'd like to bring up about that. So yeah, we ended up beating Rein, and then we were 1 game away from getting the 1 seed. And we went to play Gabe. Let's see. Here's the speed tier chart for Gabe, which again is in the wrong spot. Apparently Gabe didn't build this team. I guess Oscar did, whatever. That's kind of weird. In the Gabe build, I brought everything except momentum. This is the first time. I had 1 momentum move. I think it was... Who was it on? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I'll find it here. Not on Ensign. Not on Zarina. Not on Keldeo. Must have been Pult. Yeah, Pult had U-turn even though it was special. So I didn't really count that as, like, enough momentum to check off that box for the 9 things. Normally you need at least 2 in my opinion. But yeah, so another good build. Oh, I didn't have priority either. Yeah, that was kind of I probably should have had that somewhere. Basically on this team, if I didn't have Scissor, the priority options are Sucker Punch Dragapult, which is meh, especially on a special set like this, and Vacuum Wave Keld, which was hard to fit because I was choiced a lot. But this match was such a celebration game. Like, it was the culmination of all the hard work this season, paying off in such a fun way. Like, we got to play for the double-digit triple, which had never happened in MML history before. So I got 3 guys with 10 or more KOs. Dragapult already had it. Thunderous got it in week 10, and then Keldeo needed 2, and it got it in this game, which was awesome. And then Dragapult was at 20 kills, but 23 or 22 is the most anyone gotten in a regular season, which was Sin's Urshifu last season. So I was like, man, if I get 3 with Dragapult, then he can be the all-time KO leader for regular season, which is cool. On top of that, like I had a plus 30 differential, was the most anyone had ever gotten in MML. I got that season 1, so I was like, man, if I just win, I take that. If I just win, I take the 1 seed. I had never lost the last game of the regular season. Like I hadn't lost the last game of the first season. I hadn't lost the first game of the regular season earlier when I won that, so that was on the line too. There was just so many things. On top of that, if I won, I clinched the win seed. So just so much going on, and the fact that we accomplished all of it was so amazing. We finally got to play a weather-based match, since everyone who picked up weather did it after we played them. Like Zjayne Cole was after they played, and Gabe took over for Spooks eventually. Well, he took over for Chicken, who took over for Spooks. And then he picked up weather, so I finally got to play a weather team. The theme of this match is just hazards. Like he only had mouse hold for hazard removal, which is not a great option, and I punished it immensely. Like I set up 2 rounds of T-spikes and rocks. They were up super early and up for the whole game, and he had no way to get rid of them. And I was running Specs Hex on Dragapult, which was part of the Claude Dragapult thing that I always had in my mind, so I was able to run that. That picked up 2 KOs in that fashion. Yeah. I also like that we didn't write off Keldeo for this match because he had Sun. But it was like, oh, Terra Rock Keldeo could be good. Plus, like, Secret Sword looked decent and Icy Wind looked decent. So I brought it. And it was because I didn't want to force getting those things, like 2 kills on Keldeo for the double-digit triple, 3 kills on Pulp. But I was like, if they're there, I'm going to take them. And it made sense to bring those guys and use them the way I did. So that was cool. I also wrote, he has no water type. Jesus Christ. I know it's Sun, but my God, time to prove the thing. The thing being, if you don't have a water type and a ground type, then you don't have a team. So Gabe didn't have a team. Also, last thing, Gabe talked a little shit at some point when someone was like, somebody has to beat Nick, and Gabe had just entered the Discord, and he was like, I'll do it. I'm going to be the one to do it. And I think he was kind of kidding, but still, that had to be punished, so we beat Gabe. Yeah, Incineroar was another cool set. Chardy Berry, this was to help with Arcanine H, who we didn't bring. Wide Lens Serena, this was Heat of the Week. Didn't get to use it, but it was so cool. Like, had a lot of speed to outspeed everything after Rapid Spin. High Jump Kick and Triple Axle were accurate because I was running Wide Lens. We were finally offensive, like really offensive with Serena, so that was cool. But Tinkaton came for the first time, which was awesome. It was a really good check to Screamtail. And one other thing, and it was a way to set rocks because Claude was doing T-Spikes and need him to do both. Had Ice Hammer, which was cool. We got an Ice Hammer KO. I got to see that animation. That was freaking awesome. I love this match. It was so fun. Not difficult. Super easy. 5-0. I think I gave him something. I died to my own Life Orb recoil. Yeah, this was a rout. Easy match. 1 seed. Highest diff ever. Most wins. Never lost in the last game of the regular season. Double-digit triple. Dragapult, most KOs in the regular season. So yeah, then we came to the end of the regular season. I always do a grading of my Pokemon, just like in the moment, how I'm feeling about them, based on like their games played, their KOs, how many times they got KO'd, plus minus, the MVPs they got, the Heats, who stole all the Terras. Like you can see, I only Terra'd 8 times. That's technically wrong because Indeedee took one of them, so 9, and then 2 games I think we didn't Terra at all. Or maybe 1. I'm not sure if I have that stat might be incorrect. But yeah, then I graded. Dragapult was obviously an A+. 23 KOs, 3 times got KO'd. It's MVP of 4 different games. Probably could have been more. I Terra'd it 6 times. Like, I'm sorry, but when you have a broken thing, like, don't hesitate. Like, just use it to destroy people. So plus 20. Best season of any Pokemon on paper anyway ever. Brought it to every match. Solid A+. Keldeo A-. Only came to 7 games. Every now and again, there was something that just totally checked its stabs. Like, I don't think anyone had it in the games, but for example, like if they had Slowking. Oh, yeah, Primarina. They were Primarina twice. Like, and Keldeo doesn't get good coverage moves, so it was just sometimes it couldn't come. But 10-2 is a monster season. Plus 8. It was MVP twice. It had 2 big matches. It had a lot of big kills. Like, it KO'd Quaquaval in the Taco match. It KO'd the Scarf Como, which opened up Dragapult in the Cole match. Yeah, at some point I wrote, like, I need to bring Keldeo more because it went through a lull in the middle of the season, and then I brought it back in the end because I'm like, we are best when we're running Keldeo. So I started forcing it a little bit more. Terra'd it twice. Great Pokemon. A minus because I would have liked to bring it more, but overall it was great. Zjayne 9-3 or 9 games played, 3-4, which is great for a wall. I mean, this thing could have got no KOs and had a good season. It was MVP once. It was Heat in the Week once. B plus because it was so passive sometimes. Like Taco kind of punished it in his match, doubling to something that beats it. People had started to do that. I know Kyce did that at one point. He doubled to Kiram off of his Rotom. It was starting to feel like I'm like, damn it, like the problem with Claude is that if it lets in a really strong guy, like he doesn't threaten him back at all. So B plus, but it was still really good. Like I asked Claude to do a lot. Obviously, he came to 9 games. It was my primary hazard setter for most of the season, and it did very well. And I think in terms of like true defensive walls, like I have a lot of pivots and like grinders and trenches mons on my team, like guys who are just like in there doing the dirty work. Claude is a different thing. Like it's truly just a wall. And in terms of that for the regular season, like it was as good as any. Like Kyce's Glow King maybe had just as good a season, but honestly, like for walls, Clodzire might have been the best wall of anybody. So I love Clodzire. Scissor, I became a little bit disillusioned with toward the end. Like I'll talk a little bit more about this, but still had a good season. Like 8 games, 3-4. I didn't ask it to get a lot of KOs. Oftentimes I was in the back waiting to get KOs with bullet punch. That just we won the game too early. But no MVPs, no heats. Like I gave it a B minus. I really like Scissor. It checks off a lot of the boxes, like I said earlier when I drafted it. Like priority, setup, momentum, phasing or not phasing, screens removal, hazard removal. Like that's 5 of the 9 things on its own. So it filled a lot of gaps, and I liked Scizor. But of the mons I really liked, it was slightly underwhelming. Incineroar, I can't say. I've already said I can't say enough good things about it. Like not only was it a defensive pivot, like you guys heard all the mons I brought it to beat. So you couldn't ask more of this Pokemon, and it still went positive. Like it was 5-4, 3 Heat of the Weeks because I just love building with this thing. A plus all the way. Like loved Incineroar. Came to every match, and I often don't have guys who come to every match, but I had 2 of them this season because they were both amazing. That was Incineroar. Zarina was 7 games played, so same as like Keldeo and Thundurus, just one beneath Scizor. It also wasn't on the team for 2 games. That's part of it, but went 3-3, which is great for what I asked it to do. 3 heats. I love building with Serena. I used it in MML Season 2. I said it back then, like this thing can always be on my team, always has a spot. Like I love Serena. B plus, great season. Porygon Z, I gave it a B. It only came to 1 game, but it was really good in that game, 2-1. It was MVP of that game, so I just can't rank it higher because I didn't use it that much. Thundurus, great season, similar to Keldeo. It was the 3rd member of like my offense, being Dragapult, Keldeo, and Thundurus. 10 KOs, a couple more deaths than Keldeo, but I often used it earlier than that in the match, so that makes sense. 1 MVP, 1 Heat. I think I might have. I know I terrored it in the playoffs, but I'm missing 1 Terra stat here, I think. A minus, just like Keldeo. Great Pokemon. Wish I brought it to more games, but it was great. Tinkaton, I loved Tinkaton when I used it in the regular season. 1 game against Gabe, but it wasn't that important of a game. Like it was easy. Did pick up a KO though, so B. And then Graveler and Glalie are obvious F because I didn't use them. But I mean, that being said, they're 1-point mons. Like, what do you expect? Then I tallied like the different items I ran. So I ran Black Sludge the most just because it was Clodzire's item every time except once. Leftovers a bunch, Life Orb. These are all just the good items. Like I might be a little bit boring with my item choices. This might be true, but Banned 5 times, Specs 5 times, Scarf 5 times. Choice items are broken. We all know this. Leftovers is great. Life Orb. I've had like a funny like back and forth with Life Orb over my career. Like in the beginning, I really liked it. Then I hated it in the middle, where I'm like, oh, I don't like taking the chip and revealing that I'm Life Orb right away. Then later on, I was like, stop being a baby and just run Life Orb. Like it's super good. Boots, I ran. I didn't have to run them that much. 4 times. I think they were all on Ensign. So yeah, I never ran it on Thundurus. AV 4 times. Levisol Vest. Helmet 3 times. That was cool. Pads 3 times. Those are all Scissor. Choppleberry was that Ensign every time? Oh yeah, I think it was. Dragon Fang, I ran these boosting items on Pult, like Dragon Fang, Spell Tag, Twisted Spoon. I did run Eject Button once for the Ronin game, that was cool. Air Balloon once, Charty Berry, Citrus Berry. I ran no item 1 time. Wide Lens, yeah, so ultimately it was what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 3, 24 different items over the season. So I'm happy with that spread. And that I've looked at that before at other seasons, and that feels about normal for me. Here's the moves we picked up KOs with. Dragon Dart's got 11 KOs. 9 with U-turns, amazing. Terra Blast with 5 is awesome. Some other weird stuff in here, like got a Petal Blizzard KO. Tri Attack is cool. Ice Hammer's amazing. Yeah, this was just cool to look at, break it down a little bit. Not surprised, obviously, Dragon Pole got 23 KOs. 11 of them were darts. Wow. Secret Sword using Keldio's signature move. That's awesome. Yeah. Why is this speed tier chart here? Then I looked at like KO hit list, like who people got KOs against, and that's another boon for like Incineroar, like Torn T, Ogerpon, Heart Flame, like Gastros, like why are you killing that? Like Corviknight and something else because this thing's blocking it. Like Incineroar just had such a crazy season. Yeah, it's just cool to look at. Like, did you pick up KOs on guys who suck, or did you actually get like good KOs? Like Keldeo had some really good ones, like Iron Treads. You can see Quaquaval, Gliscor, Ninetales, Kyurem, Como, Corviknight, Weavile. Like that's an amazing list, and I think maybe that's what put it just slightly above Thunders for me. Like Donphan, Grafaiai, Mismagius, Hitmontop, like the less impressive guys, but still really good. Like Clef, Tusk, Hands, Cinderace, Buzz, Rotom Wash. Those are all good too. So yeah, it was cool to look at that. And then we got into playoffs. I did all that stuff during like my bye week, which was cool. Like you had extra time to like just mess around. Yeah, so then we got into the semifinals. Ooh man. All right, 2 more games left. Stay with me. Kyce semifinals. We had lost in the semis 2 seasons in a row, so I was fairly nervous for this matchup. Like on top of this, Kyce was definitely peaking with his team. Like I felt he was at his most confident, despite having a better beginning half of the season. I felt he had won enough games and played well against good players that he was like, yeah, I deserve to be here, which he did. And he was coming off a very impressive win against Sin in the quarters where he routed Sin pretty well. So, however, I way preferred getting this matchup than I did over Sin. Like I hated Sin's team, I did not want to play it again. So I was happy to see Kyce despite him giving me a tough matchup and peaking with his team. So I knew this time it would just be about protecting Dragapult and using it better. Like last time, I forgot to say that match went super far because I tried to revenge KO Rotom with Pult, even though it was like a little close. I thought it'd be close, but it was a roll like 50-50, and I shouldn't have done that. And I got Thunder Wave, like it hit the Thunder Wave, then I got fully parried 2 or 3 times, like in a scenario where I would have KO'd Glow King, which was the main thing making that game take forever. So totally botched that when the key to the game was like my best Pokemon. So I was like, this time I'm like, all right, just don't let that happen again and we'll be fine. In Mox, we were totally dominating. Like it seemed like there was almost no way for him to win. I remember me and Cole saying something like a crazy Terra feels like the only way we're going to lose, and then it actually happened. Like the turn where we both Terra'd was about as bad as it gets. Like he Terra'd his Ninetales A into fire, and I Terra Steeled. Like he was Scarf, so he wasn't supposed to be faster by base speed. He was because he was Scarf, and he Terra'd into something to resist my Terra Blast, and it was super effective on me. But it had a roll to KO. It was super in my favor, but if it had KO'd, that would have been the worst turn of all time, and that's exactly what we were talking about, so it almost happened. I'd like to think I still would have won if Dundee went down there, but it definitely would have been way harder. Like, I'm also, at the time, I was like, why the heck did he make that play? Like, that didn't make any sense. Like, because I had already shown him that Incin was like my screens breaker for the week. I already used Brick Break on Morgrem twice, at least once to that point, but I know I did it twice during the game. And I was like, so why didn't you expect me to go to Incineroar? Like, it eats the ice move, which is the thing that would hit Thundurus. And even if you Terra Fire, like, I resist that too. So it just made no sense. Like, I didn't know why he clicked Terra Fire there, but he had it for Scissor, obviously, because that was the switch into Ninetales last time. And I think he thought I was going to go Tinkaton because that resists both stabs. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a little sense. Plus, he was Choice Scarf, so if he was going to make the predict, he had to do it then. Like, you can't switch moves. I'm like, all right, that makes a little sense. It's also one of those scenarios where I think, like, he wasn't, in his mind, he's like, well, I'm obvious, like, I'm not Aurora Veil, but, like, I didn't know that. So he should have thought, like, what's he going to do to beat Aurora Veil? But that wasn't on his mind. He was just like, what's the best thing I can do with my Scarfer? So it makes a little sense, but, whew, that was almost so bad. Yeah, a big thing here was finally using Thundurus' Defiant. That got me a lot of ground in the early game, like chip on Glow King, chip on Corviknight, chip on Morgrem. Like, that was really good. So that ended up working, which was great. We didn't have Tinkaton last time, so we forced ourselves to bring Clodsire. I talked about my frustration with that already. It was sketchy bring due to Kyurem. Now we finally got to bring Tinkaton. This one made Tinkaton a huge pickup. Like, I mean, anytime you pick up a thing midway through the season, it ends up having a good role in the playoffs. It's like, well, clearly that was a good pickup. Like I said, Ninetales had a pretty bad showing last time because of Scissor. I expect Volcarona to come in its place. At some point, I do right, or at least I knew. Like if Ninetales comes, it's going to be like something offensive or weird. So I was ready for that, and it still did some pretty good work against me. I ran Choice Specs Dragapult back again, just spam Shadow Ball. I talked about it last time, like he doesn't have good switches. So I did that again. Thundurus was the MVP with the Yachi Berry, which is cool to boost up acrobatics and also buy me a turn against Great Tusk. That was awesome. I love that set. So many notes on that thing. Scarf Keldeo again, here to revenge Kyurem, just in case he gets +1. There was a moment in the match where Kyurem got in, and if he was Dragon Dance plus like Outrage, I probably would have lost. So you can hear it in the video. I'm like holding my breath, and the turn goes, and he clicks Draco Meteor, and I knew at that point we were gonna win. I was like, you can hear me just going, oh, Jesus, like it was. Kyurem is scary, man. Tinkaton Focus Sash lead, get rocks up, got him up 2 or 3 times. Encore was cool just to stop setup at the beginning. This was so cool that I was able to use this in the semis, and it did really well. Serena Rocky Helmet was such a tough bring. Like, I thought it didn't have... Like, yeah, this is what I wrote. Like, last time we kind of had nothing for offensive Tusk, and he ended up bringing it. And he messed up going for the knockoff to a KO on Thundurus and letting us KO him. It was really lucky. I'm hoping Serena can check it. I didn't bring it last time because I was like, oh, if he's boosting item, like, we can't check it. But if he's no boosting... Like, we can deal with it. Like, we'll get Rocky Helmet Chip. We can synthesis stuff off. Like, we'll be okay. It combos well with, like, if he rocks, then we're coming in to spin him anyway. So Serena did get the spin off in this match. And Serena was great in both playoff matches, and especially here. Yeah, I can't say enough about Serena, really. Incineroar again. Assault Vest. I figured he'd be Special Kyurem this time, so I brought Assault Vest. Plus, I didn't want to bring Scissor because I knew he's going to have Terrifier on either Kyurem like he did last time or on Ninetales, which he was Ninetales. Terrifier, and he popped it. So I was like, I need to change up who's going to come to break the screens. So I did it Incin instead with Brick Break, and it worked. He Brick Break the screens on Morgrem twice, so that was good. He also would have done well against Kyurem because it was special, so... Still does okay against Kyurem, taking 50% max from Timid Earth Power. Still intimidating the physical set. Yep. Speed is 1 point faster than Morgrem, no speed. He was Morgrem, no speed. Also, yeah, I didn't bring Claude this time, so I needed something for Volcarona, and the Spadef means I did really well against Volcarona, which fortunately he didn't bring because that might have been tough without Claude, but yeah, this match went pretty well. He hung around, made it a little bit difficult, but in the end, like, that no ghost resistance other than Morgrem, who's bad, and no normal type, like, Dragapult just pieced him up. I don't exactly remember. Dragapult KO's Morgrem, KO's Tusk, KO's Corviknight, KO's Ninetales. Yeah, I got 4 KOs. Like, once it was in, it was just unswitchable. Thundurus had a big game, picking up the other 2 KOs and barely surviving that Terra Blast. Yeah, that game went really well. We go into one last finals. That was amazing. I was really happy to get past that. I had lost in semis the last 2 seasons, so I was really nervous. But we got past that, and then we were on to our final game of our career. We played Taco again, who I was right. I was like, man, I think he's going to be a top coach. Well, yeah, he was the 2 seed and the guy who played in the final. So here it is. This is it. One last game, win or lose. That's how I felt. I wasn't going to come back whether I lost or not. I said previous build might have been the best in the entire season. I still think that's correct. Except this one topped it. This one's even better. I wrote I should take the best of 3 route and not exactly run it back, take the initiative and predict his changes and adjustments, which I did. I played 2 seasons of you bring 6 Pokemon to the match, you have to pick 4 for the match, and then it's best of 3. So it's just like VGC except it was singles. And Cole came up with the idea back then. Like, I remember I was like, if you win game 1, just run it back game 2 and see how they adjust. And Cole was like, no, you should make the changes. You should try to adapt or give him your second look at your team before, like, don't let him just win game 2 for no reason. So that's kind of how I approached this. It was like, try to think about what he's going to do and make the changes. Don't just bring back the same thing and let him make the changes and beat you. Like, that's stupid. Last time his build was good, except for Drifblim. That was his attempt to bring something for Keldeo, but it got sacked early. I said that could be Glim or Enam. It ends up being Enam. Other one I said maybe no Electro. Jirachi is possible. Yep, that was true. I said except it's checked by Incineroar very badly, which is exactly what happened. I'm expecting Gouging, Lycanroc, and Quaquaval 100%. They all came. Next tiers of likely bring is Tinglu. Glim didn't come. Enam did come. Electrode and Dunsparce weren't there. Then I said Jirachi. Yeah, was there. So I was pretty spot on with his stuff. Last time he had no hazard removal or phasing. I think Glim comes with Mortal Spin. I was wrong about that. It was Quaquaval, which Cole was more on. I thought it might be bulky with Spin, but Cole was like, no, that's what's coming, and he was right. I talked about the speed creeping he did last time. Like he sped crept to like modest or adamant max pull with a few things. Like his Scarfer was that, Gouging Fire once it got +1 was that, and his Electrode was that. So I was like, okay, he's dead set on that. So I played on that this time by my Scarfer just being 1 point faster than that. I was correct. He did it again. So that was good with Keld. Like I added this 20 speed just to be faster than that. Bulky Scarf Keld. I said earlier in the season that was like my favorite set of it, and I brought it here in the finals. Metal Coat Scizor here. Last time I was banded, I switched it up. Last time I was set up, Pult, banded, Scizor. I swapped them. I was banded, Pult, set up Scizor this time. And I wanted Scizor to not be banded so it can help hit Enamorous, who I thought might come, which is cool. And then, yeah, I wanted set up somewhere, so I had it. This was the first time all season anybody playing me, and including myself, had all 9 things in their build. I had all 9 things. So this is the best build of the season. It also had no moves that can miss. So I love this build. Like I called what he would bring in some degree. It had all 9 things I love. It didn't have a move that can miss. Like I did switch it up from last time. Can't say enough about this build. I love it. Dragapult, like I said, he was banned this time. Ended up being MVP. In playoffs, the best Pokemon get better. Like they only perform even more important roles. Like sometimes you get guys with like who had big seasons, like 10 or more KOs, they get into playoffs and they're fraudulent. Like they got 10 KOs just all at the end of games, just sweeping like when everything was chipped, and it turns out when they play the good teams, like they're not good enough. Like that was not Pult. 4 KOs in the first match, 3 in this match. Like that's an MVP performance in playoffs. Clodsire, Black Sludge, I brought it again. Last time I was Haze Water Absorb. He clicked a water move anyway against somebody, so he was just like, didn't respect it. I'm like, fine, I'll be unaware this time. And I wanted Poison Jab because I thought Enamorous might come. I was correct. So I couldn't be Haze. Rocks did go up, got 1 turn of chip on Enamorous, but he did spin him off. Incineroar with the Shuka Berry. Oh, this was a really good call. It bought us an extra turn that we may not have otherwise had. So last time, Incineroar came as the check to Gouging Fire. He was ready for it. He had Clear Amulet. This time he was ready again. He had Clear Amulet, but he Earthquaked the first time instead of messing around and DDing. And this was why I was Shuka Berries, just in case he was. If I was Boots, I would have taken way more from that first Earthquake, and it looked like probably gotten 2 KO'd. But because we were Shuka Berry, we took the first Earthquake. He Earthquaked again. We lived on really low health, and Incineroar was able to stick around the rest of the match. He came in on 2 Zen Headbutts from Jirachi. He came in on Jirachi another time, or took a Jirachi U-turn. Like, Incineroar was big. And living that because I was Shuka Berry instead of Heavy Duty Boots, which was, I waffled over that like all week prepping. So I'm really glad I made that decision. That was a good call. Serena was Heat of the Week. Yeah. I mean, nothing really had to be Heat, but Serena coming with Trop Kick because I was like, man, if he's Weakness Policy Ting Lu, he gets it off, and he Terras, and he's like Rest Sleep Talk, but he wasn't all that stuff, but he was Weakness Policy. Trop Kick's the only way going to be to like mitigate him. So I'm glad I brought that, and I called him being Weakness Policy, which is cool. This set has a lot of intricate things that it does with its EVs. You can read those there at some other time, but yeah. Instant just had such a big role the rest of the game, like I said, and then it was also a trust in Serena game to like do its job, and boy did Serena do its job. It was really poetic that the last 3 Pokemon I had left at the end of the game were the regular season and playoff MVP. It won it with the last 2 KOs, and the other 2 Mons I had were Incineroar hanging on by a thread, and Scizor, who was on my first ever draft team that I ended up losing in the semifinals with, and I was finally able to get him a ring. So that was just so cool. The match went really well. It was a masterclass in like keeping out Gouging Fire, because if I ever let him in easily, it was going to be able to set up and win at some point, like once Incineroar was weak. And I was able to play the rest of the game without allowing gouging fire in easily. He even caught me with like a really nice Custap berry play with his Enamorus that caught Keldeo. If he hadn't done that, the game would have been a rout. But he did that, made it close, and in the end, I played the end game pretty well, and I was able to pull it home with Dragapult. I bet it all on him, terrored him early, and he got it done by spamming Terra Blast Fairy. So we got a championship. We won our last game. I ended with some like playoff grades, which I normally do. It's pretty simple. It was just 2 games. I kind of already talked about it. Pult was an A+, Keld was a B, Claude B, Scissor B, and Sin was an A+ again. Zarina was an A because it came to both matches and did its job. Like, spun off rocks in both matches, picked up KOs. Zarina was really clutched up in the playoffs. The thing was awesome. Porygon didn't come, so F, I guess. Thundurus only came to 1 match, but man, did it do really good, A-. Tinkaton came to 1, did its job, B, and the other 2 didn't come, 2 F. So yeah, that's my whole team sheet. 61 pages on like 12 font. So yeah, you might look at that and think it's crazy, but yeah, I'm so happy to get these guys a championship. I love this team and this season so much. Like, I'm glad it was the one I chose to end it on. I truly have nothing left to accomplish in Pokemon Draft. Like, I've done everything I wanted to. It gives me so much joy and so much good times to look back on. I'll always look back on this with happiness. So yeah, that was what happened in the season. The only other thing I want to talk about was like I did some like metadata. I'm not even sure I'm using that term correctly, but like I looked at a bunch of stuff that happened during the season. So for those 9 things that I like to have during a game, I looked at to see like did my opponent bring them, and here's what you guys brought. Like Cole 6 of them, Zjayne 7, Taco 7, Ronan had 7. Those are the most of anybody. Palafins had only 3. That was the least. Sin had 6, Ronan 7. I said Kyce had 5. Mitch only had 4. Rein had 5. Gabe had 5. Kyce brought 5 again, and then Taco 6 in the final. Obviously, that's my own grading of them. Like I said, I don't think you have momentum unless you have like 2 of them, and they're pretty legit. So you might have had momentum in your match, but only 1, so I gave you a red. Like Palafins brought priority to our match, but it was Shadow Sneak Muck. Like that barely counts. I didn't count it for checking off that box, but yeah, the league average. Obviously, you guys aren't necessarily trying to bring these 9 things. We're just curious to see how if you guys how much you guys did bring. The league average was 5.5 of the 9 things. The playoff team average was 5.9, so they averaged a little bit more. My averages on each thing itself, like I brought everything. I only didn't bring each of these things a maximum of 2 times. Like everything I brought 12 or 11 out of the 13 games, except for setup, as I said, not my strength. So I only brought that 8 times. That's still pretty good for me. Yeah. So here's some like conclusions I came to about them. Like I was higher than the league average in everything but setup. Okay. I was higher than playoff teams in everything except hazard setting and trick plays. So the playoff teams really like to set hazards against me. Playoff teams were higher on average and in these categories. They were higher in hazard removal, hazard settings. So playoff teams are way more interested in hazards. They were better at momentum, screens removal, which was mostly just a factor of playoff teams having Corviknight and having Defog, and then trick plays. The only category I didn't do more than twice was setup, I said. The finals match was the only game me or anybody had 9 out of the 9. And then Taco, Zjayne, and Ronan had the most with 7 out of 9. And then I did some data on hazards, like did I get hazards up? What were they? I wrote them in. Were they removed? Did they get hazards up and were they removed? Yeah, so that's the data that came here. I got hazards up in every game except Palafins and Ronan, where I didn't bring them. So if I brought hazards, they went up. That's a testament mostly to Clodsire and a little bit of Zarina or Tinkaton at the end. Like, you guys know me, I love hazards, like, but if I wanted them up, they got up. So that was really cool to see. Hazards up against me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. They got spun 4 times out of the 6, which is pretty good. That means Serena did really well because they were all rapid spins. Despite bringing defog on Scissor, I never defogged hazards. I just defogged screens once. Yeah, we got hazards up 11 out of 13, and they only went up 6 out of 13. I talked about that. We got up 3 of the 4 types of hazards. We didn't have webs on our team, so we got up every kind that we had. And only 2 of the 4 kinds got up against us. Spikes were just Taco both times. Those were immediately spun both times. No one ever brought webs or T-spikes against us. Having a good poison type, I think, is slightly overrated by people in draft, but it really helped having Claude. It meant that people weren't even looking at T-Spikes, which is cool. Screens went up 3 times against us, 3 games anyway, in both of Kyce's matches and against Gabe. In both of Kyce's matches, they were removed. Veil went up once, I defogged it. Reflect went up twice in the semis, and we brick braked it both times. Gabe got light screen and reflect up 1 time. We did not remove it. Then he got light screen up. We did not remove it. The first set, we didn't even attack for all 8 turns. Like, we just got up hazards and lived hits. So it didn't matter. And then the second round of light screen, we had 1 special attack where it was lessen the damage, and the other 2 attacks were infiltrator, so we went through them. So we handled screens and hazards very well throughout the season. I looked at setup. This is an amazing stat. No one all season got a single kill against me after clicking a setup move. Like, people were able to set up, but they never got a KO after setting up, so it never led to anything. So I correctly identified an issue in my game and totally fixed it this season. I looked at who got the first KO every game. I got the first KO in all of them but 3 games. Sin got the first in mine. In our match, Mitch got the first, and Rein got the first. I won all 3 of those games. I never had one of the big 3 offensive guys. That's Pult, Keldeo, and Thunderous. They never were my first death. So that was amazing. I always say preserve the offense for the end if you can. I looked at who terrored first. I terrored first 4 times, the opponent 7 times in 2 games. 1 game neither of us terrored, and the other game we terrored at the same time in the semis. I couldn't draw any conclusions from that. It didn't seem like that really meant anything. I know a lot of people say, like, don't terror first, or the person who terrors first usually loses. I don't subscribe to that. It's definitely a different game before and after you terror. Like, once it's done, you don't have that worry in the back of your mind. But if you get enough out of it early, it's fine. Like, I terrored first in the finals. No big deal. Then I also looked at... I tried to quantify luck as much as I could. So I looked at the moves people brought against me that could miss, and the moves that they actually clicked that could miss, and whether they did miss. In the end, I was slightly more lucky than unlucky, but I don't think it was very significant. This is a pretty impressive stat. I clicked 13 missable moves all season, and I hit every one of them. So in that regard, I was definitely lucky. In 5 of the 13 games, we either didn't bring a move that could miss or didn't click one, including both playoff games. I did not click a move that could miss, and in the final, I didn't even bring one. So I definitely did a good job with that stuff. The combined odds of hitting all my 13 missable moves was 20%, so I said we can't say we were unlucky. Yeah, I mean, that was good for sure. It's still hard to quantify luck because there are things like, there's other luck things involved in the game. Like, when Zjayne hit a Dragon Tail against me, it pulled out Scissor, which is who I wanted to come out. So, like, that was really lucky. Then there's crits, of course. Like, Ronan got a crit that really mattered, but like I said, that might not have changed the game. Who knows? So it's still hard to quantify luck, but I just thought it'd be good to, like, look at this stuff and have a, better information about how the season actually went. Of the 312 moves I brought all season, which is 4 moves on 6 guys, 13 games, 4 times 6 times 13, 312. I brought all season, I only brought 31 that could even miss, which is just under 10% of the moves I brought. So less than 10% of moves I brought even had a chance to miss. 17 of those were 90% or more. The lowest was Thunder, 70%. I didn't click it and plan on clicking it. Zarina had the most with 11, which was just power whip most of the time. Of course, high jump kick and triple axel a couple times. Pult had 8 of them, which was mostly Draco Meteor and Fire Blast. Keldeo had 7 of them, mostly Hydro Pump and Icy Wind. Claude had 3, which was like Gunk Shot once and High Horsepower twice, I think. Tinkaton had 1 in Ice Hammer. Mimikyu had 1 in Play Rough. This is amazing stat. Incineroar, Scizor, and Thunderous never even brought a missable move. That's amazing. Opponents clicked missable moves 29 times, so more than double we did. Us 13, them 29. So I definitely played toward not having to deal with bad luck more than other people. Opponents missed 5 moves all season. Cole missed Sacred Fire on Keldeo. That didn't matter that much. I was built to take those on. He missed a Stone Edge on Incineroar, which we already talked about. That was probably the biggest of the season. Zjayne missed a triple axle on Keldeo. It was Scarf Weavile, and that match was so easy that did not matter. Kyce missed a scale shot on Incin. That mattered a little bit, but in the end, I don't think it would have made the biggest difference. I think it was an intimidated scale shot. Like, the one he hit me was after he +1'd on, so it was neutral, and so it did a lot, and he kind of did like head calcs. He was like, man, if I had hit that one, but it was like the one you missed was -1, so it wouldn't have, like, I would have lived for sure, that one and the other scale shot. It just meant I might have went down to recoil from Flare Blitz, but we won by 2 Pokemon, so I think it would have been fine. That one was probably the second most critical or significant. And then Rein missed a Heat Wave on Clodsire, which we already talked about would have done like less than Black Sludge damage, so that didn't matter. So while my opponents missed a lot more, they clicked a lot more, and most of them I don't think were significant. I know it's subjective, but I looked at them pretty closely. The moves they missed were 95% on 2 of them, 180% and 290, so it's not like they were clicking Thunders and stuff, but still, I don't think it was a big deal. Once again, it's hard to draw conclusions on the importance of these. The most obvious is the Stone Edge. It was still a 50-50 to KO, and Cole needed more good plays after that to win. The average of the opponent's 28 missable moves, I told you I like to go really in depth, that they clicked had an accuracy of 88.92%. So after 28 clicks, that should yield 3.1 misses anyway. So we were slightly lucky in that regard, like they missed more than they should have, but in the end, I don't think it had a huge impact on the season. It's just cool to look at all that stuff. So, yeah, that was my metadata for the season, I guess. So now you know all about my season. I do highly recommend making that team sheet that I had just to compile your notes and your thoughts. I think it's cool to have and look back on. Now that I'm done with Draft League, I've been looking back at all mine. I have one for every of the 9 seasons I did. So yeah, it's cool to look at. The keys for the season were these 2 triples. Like, we had a 3-headed dragon on offense with Bolt. You know, the double-digit triple that we got. You know, I think we had something like almost 60 KOs or something like that, and over half of them were from these guys. I think we had a little bit less than 60. So yeah, I mean, these guys had to do the offense, and they got it done, and they only got KO'd 9 times. So that was regular season stats. Add another 2 for Thunders in playoffs and 7 for Bolt. So yeah, they did great. And then the other thing here is this. I knew this was the heart and soul of the team. Like, that was the offense, but these are the grinders, or as Cole likes to call them, the trenches mons. Like, they are in the trenches early on, switching in moments that are difficult. And that's Incineroar, Scizor, and Serena. They have 2 things in common. One, they all have U-turn and knockoff, which are great on Pokemon like that. U-turn keeps momentum, get the offensive guys in, and knockoff gets you something out of a turn if you're a little bit passive. And then they all had things they did together and stuff they did apart. Like, Incineroar is the main phaser other than Claude, and then of course Intimidate is always so valuable. Scizor has priority, and the main form priority on our team, and then setup. He was often the setup guy as well. Serena blocked the other team's priority with Queenly Majesty, and then was the only one of these 3 that had consistent healing outside of lefties or berries with Synthesis. Then together, Incin and Scizor did the screens removal with Scizor's Defog, and they both had Brick Break. Together, Scizor and Serena were the more offensive of the trio, and then they also provided hazard removal with Spin and Defog. And then together, Serena and Incin were the more defensive of the duo, and they were also the ones that were speed creeping, because Scizor was normally just bullet punch. I didn't speed creep much with it. But Serena, I sped crept to like outspeed things after a rapid spin, which came to fruition. And then you guys saw with Incin, I was always running, or constantly running, like a little bit of speed, especially in that Kyce game was the highlight of it. So yeah, it was kind of like Incin was the most defensive of the 3, Scizor was the most offensive, and Serena was kind of the middle ground. They all ran Bandit at some point. They all ran a bunch of different items. Incineroar came to every game. Like, these guys were amazing. Scizor came to 8. Serena came to 7. Like, these guys get the job done early on in the game, doing switches that people don't want to do, not picking up KOs, but like getting the damage done so that the offense has an easy clean later or a sweep. So I can't say enough about drafting these type of Pokemon, and I suggest these immensely. Like, these ones were great, especially Incineroar. It's one of my favorite Pokemon I've ever used. Totally the captain of the team. All right, I've said enough. This is how I won MML Season 4. This was the ending version of the team. I'm really proud of the win. I think it was the most competitive season in MML history. I'm looking forward to the future for you guys. I will not be participating. I'm done doing Draft League. I'm retiring. I'm going out on this one. But the league has a bright future. Rein and Kyce are going to make this a really great place to continue battling, and I hope you guys still have a good time and as fun a time as I did. And I just really want to thank everyone who was a part of it. It was so much fun. Like I said, I'm going to watch all the videos back. I'm going to look at my team sheet. I'm going to watch this video, probably the highlight video I made, and just always look back on this fondly. It was a really good experience, and I hope you guys have as good an experience as I had in the future. So good luck with whatever it is you're doing, be it draft or not, and thanks again, guys.